I never want to go caving again. Have you heard of the Dark Chamber? I couldn't believe I had even agreed to do it, but if it would make Mel happy, I would do anything. The experience was advertised as a haunted cave tour by lantern light, and even though I've never been one to believe in the supernatural, I wouldn't have doubted it here. It looked terrifying just from the pictures online. Extremely cramped spaces that they force you to crawl through at one point, sections with uncomfortably low visibility, and terrifyingly vast caverns that seemed to have impossibly high ceilings. It was everything she loved. It was a bit of a drive away from the city, but the scenery made up for it with its beauty. Twisting roads lined with pine trees led our ascent higher into the Rockies. The cave was tucked away into the side of a towering mountain, a series of large log cabins next to the entrance. The air was pure and refreshing up here, eminent the moment we stepped out of our car. I took a moment to savor it, knowing we would soon be deep within the earth. We stopped at the main building, where we exchanged our tickets for a lantern that was to be shared between us. It was bustling with activity, kids running around the gift shop screeching with joy. Just a reminder, at some points during the experience your light will be turned off for a moment, the woman behind the counter said with a smile. Don't panic when it happens, it's just part of the experience, it'll come back on. I picked up the object and took a moment to observe it, noting how there was no obvious way to open any of the panels or to turn the light on or off. We picked up some guide pamphlets on the counter and made our exit out of the cabin, following the trail to the cave's entrance. How do you think they're going to turn it off? Mel asked, staring at it swinging between us as we walked. Look at it. It's not an actual lantern. It's probably just a light bulb they can control with, like, Bluetooth or something, I said. We stood before the mouth for a second before entering. As if listening, the light turned on. I'd never experienced claustrophobia until the moment I stepped into the cave. Cold wind rushed through my ears, overwhelming my senses. Stalactites loomed overhead, casting long shadows that blended into the ever-present darkness that consumed every direction. Small lights lined the rocky walls, offering just barely enough light to make out the entrance and our immediate surroundings beyond what the lantern reached. I tried to imagine the children from the gift shop struggling to keep calm in here. We stood idly by a large sign marking the beginning of the tour. A few stragglers loitered close by, frequently checking the time on their phones. It was meant to have started a few minutes ago, but I guess they could just be running late. I'm gonna go run to the bathroom real quick. Be right back. Mel nudged me playfully, already turning to leave. Hurry up, we might leave without you, I teased. She turned and rolled her eyes at me before stepping out of the mouth of the cave, speed walking to the cabins. I felt even more uncomfortable standing there alone, feeling as though the walls would cave in and collapse on top of me. Feeling overwhelmed, I stared down at the lantern weighing down my right hand, watching how it illuminated the stalagmites circling me. I watched the shadows dance as a large figure shifted behind me. How much longer do you think it'll be? This place has already given me the creeps, said one of the men who had been standing nearby, now closer to me. He looked equally as nervous as I felt. I hadn't noticed him before, which was surprising given the large stature of the man. His fingers toyed with the creased pamphlet in his hands. Hopefully not too long. It hasn't even started yet, and I'm starting to feel the same way too, honestly. It felt good to know someone else shared my fears. Do you know how long the tour is going to last? He thought for a moment, glancing down at his pamphlet. It's supposed to only be about 45 minutes, but apparently their dark chamber attraction tends to make it draw on a bit longer. At least that's what it says. I felt my pocket for my own company, tugging the crumpled paper out. A map of the whole cave system sprawled across 3 pages, which one highlighting some of the main attractions in the different sections. The dark chamber was marked towards the end, a huge feature taking up most of the page. Traverse through our darkest chamber with only one light to guide you. Stay close to the wall, stay close to your guide. They lurk in the center. They? Who's they? Do you see that last line in the description? I don't know, I think it's part of the bit they tell the kids where they... So sorry about that, folks. A lanky man made his way over to our group. My last tour went a bit over. I'll be sure to make it up to you all. His voice bounced off the walls as he spoke, amplifying the volume. I glanced behind me to see Mel running over just in time. The tour guide smiled. Alright, let's go over some basic safety procedures. Most of the tour was uneventful. We wandered through different sections of the cave system, listening to recountings of its history and local legends. Fortunately, most of the things highlighted on the website had been exaggerated, like the passage you have to crawl through, were actually just areas we had to slightly duck to get through. Our lights did flicker quite a few times, much to our amusement. The tour guide would allude to something supernatural, and on cue, they would flicker or turn off for a moment. Despite a lot of the tour being a bit cheesy, the tunnels themselves were eerily beautiful. Deep, cavernous ridges and the rock-like claw marks decorating the walls. Our lanterns illuminated sparkling minerals and revealed giant, sprawling caverns full of history. There were roped-off areas with hanging employees-only signs, though beyond the rope was always pitch black nothing. So many sections were blocked off that it made me a bit uncomfortable, though I suppose I don't have any other caving experiences to compare it to. Anytime we stood close to them, I always felt like something might try to grab me from the darkness, just waiting for me to move over just close enough for them to pounce. It was also just so cold throughout the entire cave system, and it seemed to just get colder the further we pressed on. Overall, though, we were both really enjoying the whole experience so far. Until we reached the passageways leading to the dark chamber. You know, the legends claim something roams through these caves. The guide spoke lowly, his baritone voice reverberating off the walls. Apparently, the first people to ever find these caves went missing. For a long time, we thought the system was discovered in 1947. It wasn't until we began having expositions deeper into the cave that their corpses were discovered, along with papers dated to 1912. He spoke with a voice that reminded me of a camp counselor telling ghost stories. Another group was also discovered from 1923. While they had long since decomposed, there was something strange about their remains. The clothes that they wore were completely tattered, with long jagged gashes of ripped blood stained in their place. The rocks surrounding them were also etched with long, frantic scratch marks. This is a bit dramatic for a children's gimmick, isn't it? I raised my eyebrows at Mel for her input, but she merely shrugged in response. He continued talking as we walked through more of the narrow passageways, leading up to the attraction. It was surreal being down here. With so little light, we were completely reliant on our lanterns. I gripped the handle on mine tightly. There was a path that was so narrow that we had to walk single file to pass through, the guide's voice being completely inaudible until we made it out to the other side. Alright, so for this section I'm going to need you all to pay close attention. How this works is that we'll all be holding onto a rope to connect us all. We're about to navigate through the dark cavern, a place where almost no light penetrates, including our lantern. Luckily, mine seems to always stay on, he said with a wink. It'll only last about a minute. For your safety, please hold on tightly to the rope and stay close to the wall. This is so performative, Mel chuckled. How much do you think the kids freak out? My cheeks flushed as people turned to look at us. I elbowed her lightly. We began filing into a neater line as they began passing the rope back. The guide's voice was mostly unintelligible so far ahead of us, but he seemed to still be talking about safety procedures. The man I'd spoken to before shuffled in front of me. The rope finally reached him, our hands brushing as he shakily handed the end of it to me. I looked up for a moment and recoiled, shocked by the look of genuine worry on his face, sweat glimmering on his skin despite the frigidity of the cave. I wanted to say something, anything, but the people ahead of us began moving forward. Hurriedly, I passed Mel the end of the rope and gripped tightly to the remaining section in my hands. Remember to stay close, the guide's voice echoed off the walls. I watched his headlight slowly disappear into the darkness. We passed through the entrance into the section, crossing under the sign warning of danger ahead. In an instant, I was plunged into darkness. With the complete absence of light, it was impossible to see anything. Whether my eyes were open or closed, the same view greeted me, an oppressive black void that threatened to swallow me whole. Wind shuddered like cool breath against my neck. I wanted to collapse into myself. The rope tugged me forward. I felt my legs unwillingly move with it, forcing myself to keep going. My shoulders scraped and dragged against the jagged wall. I blindly followed the person in front of me, cursing myself for ever agreeing to do this. I felt the rope ahead of me veer slightly to the right, then immediately fall limp. A wave of panic washed over me, fearing it somehow got cut, yet I kept being pulled forward. Without letting go of my own grip, I slide my palms up the coarse rope, trying to feel for the man. It burns and skins my hands as I bend myself awkwardly to extend my arms as far as possible. Yet I just keep going, never bumping into another person. The guide's headlamp disappears into an abyss of light ahead of us. Relief washes over me as I see the end in sight, my legs desperately pulling forward to get back to the surface. Blinding light temporarily shocks me as I emerge back into the entrance. My eyes struggled to adjust, but between blinking I saw the empty space in front of me. Before I begin to say anything, we were being ushered out of the cave. The guide collects the end of the rope from Mel and corrals us like a herding dog to the exit. Alright, looks like that's everyone. I hope you guys enjoyed the tour. Please be sure to check out the gift shop and explore the other activities we have around here. Thank you all and come back soon. He seemed eager to get us to leave. I suppose it was due to time constraints, thinking of what the man had said to me earlier. I look around for him once more, trying to spot his face among the crowd of us leaving. Yet I still don't see him anywhere. We find ourselves back inside the gift shop. In between looking at tacky knickknacks, I find myself looking towards the door each time the bell chimes, hoping to see the man walk in at any point. I just can't remember seeing him leave. Hey, do you guys think the guy in front of us during the rope bit was part of the tour? I still haven't seen him anywhere. I think he snuck out or something to scare us, I say, turning to Mel. What? Who are you talking about? She barely looks up from the shelf she's looking at. You know, the guy in front of me when we were in the chamber. He completely disappeared while we were in there. He must have gone through one of those employee-only areas or something. She finally turns to face me, eyebrows furrowed in confusion. Steph, there was a woman in front of us the whole time. No one has ever lived in this house. Back in 2017, I was about 6 months out of an internship with a local law firm. I was a junior legal assistant as part of a retainer team for a statewide biodiesel business. It wasn't my only assignment, but it was the one I was formally hired for. However, during downtime, I was bounced around various teams all throughout the year. It was early February when the call came. The biodiesel place had a new owner, and he wanted to shake things up. Our jobs were safe, but he wanted to make some investments. New manufacturing plants, 2 in Missouri and 1 to the west, within reasonable driving range from their warehouses. Only problem was, there were no suitable properties to build on. This could be a multi-million-dollar kind of thing, but we didn't have a property to sign off on. That is until I realized the area they were looking at, my old hometown of Tomskog, Minnesota. I suggested looking into an old property I'd gone by 1,000 times on my way to school. It was this massive empty field on the outskirts of the town with nothing but a few run-down houses that could be easily torn down. We knew the place was privately owned, but had no idea of who the proprietor was. My boss was ecstatic. See, the client had been considering calling the whole thing off, but if we could offer them a property, we could probably get a fat bonus check along with a finder's fee. It would be enough to take the junior part off my title. Since I suggested it, I was given time off to get in touch with the owner of the property. There were some initial problems. The original property documents had been damaged in a flood back in 2014, and only part of the archive had been digitized. The document I was looking for might not have been digitized yet, and since no immediate documents were available, I was starting to suspect the worst. The clerk at the municipal office promised they'd get back to me with a name within 4 to 8 weeks, 12 at the most. That wasn't an option. So I packed my bags, handed my cat to my mom, got the fancy maroon BMW company car, and set my sights on familiar roads. It took me 2 stops for gas and a needlessly complicated detour because of a fallen oak tree, but I made my way to that field just as the sun started to set. After all these years, it was exactly as I remembered. One large empty property, now covered in mud-stained February snow. A run-down barn at the edge of the property, and a small 1-story log cabin right next door. All roads were overgrown, and there were no discernible paths out there. I considered going back in the morning, but I figured I had some time left. Maybe there was this big plaque with the name of the owner out front. If so, I could have it all settled in a day and be on my way home before I even had the time to unpack. It was getting late, and the shadows were growing longer, but I was willing to roll those dice. I double-checked my phone, got a flashlight from the trunk, and locked my car. The snow was deep enough to reach my knees. My fancy shoes felt like paper. The cold went straight through. Still, I pushed on, beelining straight across the field. I severely overestimated how much time I had left. By the time I got to the cabin, it was already getting dark. Using the flashlight, I took a quick lap around the place, just to make sure I wasn't walking into some kind of hillbilly trap room. It didn't take long for me to realize that this place had been abandoned for years. Not only was it boarded up, but the boards used were rotten. That the place was standing at all was nothing short of a miracle. I tried knocking a little, just to make sure no one was home, but I wasn't holding my breath. The place was desolate. I looked for some kind of name, or plaque, or bell, something carved into a wall somewhere, anything, but there really was nothing. I considered coming back in the morning, but I could see dark clouds on the horizon, and I didn't want to walk through that snow more times than necessary. I decided I'd do a little urban exploring. After all, if the door was open, it wouldn't hurt to have a peek inside. Walking up to the door, I noticed something strange. There was a carving at the top of the doorframe. Word by word, my flashlight revealed the full sentence. No one has ever lived in this house. I tried to wrap my brain around it. It didn't make much sense. What the hell did that even mean? Of course someone had lived there. Someone built it, and someone owned the property. Why would there be a house in the middle of nowhere that no one had ever lived in? I hesitated. Something told me to just walk away and come back in the morning, but the clouds on the horizon and my freezing feet were telling me otherwise. There was a carving. That meant someone had the habit of leaving messages. Chances were there might be more of them inside. Twiddling the handle a little, I noticed the door was unlocked. So in I went. The cabin had a very basic layout. There was one large room with a wooden bench facing a simple fireplace. There were 2 handmade tables, and the westernmost wall was lined with dried herbs, mostly blue and black. There was a surprisingly clean cowskin on the floor, as well as a small door on the easternmost side of the room, leading to a kitchen. It was mostly just an antique kind of stove and a couple of cabinets. But whoever lived there must have been accustomed to a sparse lifestyle. But no, that wasn't it. I had to correct myself. The carving said no one had ever lived there. Then why the furniture? I decided to ignore the message for the time being, instead focusing on finding the name of whoever owned the place. There might be some initials on the handmade furniture. I gently moved the bench and tables first, going over them with my flashlight. There were no obvious markings, but another problem quickly arose. My flashlight was giving up on me. It started to flicker. Looking around, I could see no other possible source of light but the old fireplace, and I couldn't imagine that thing not being clogged. Then again, there was firewood, and I did have a lighter. I quit smoking about 2 years prior, but I always kept it around, just in case. Breaking off a piece of bark and lighting it, I double-checked to make sure the smoke cleared and went out. Surprisingly, it did. Glancing at my phone, I figured I could use it for a flashlight as well, but I didn't want to drain the battery. Instead, I lit a fire and left the front door open just in case the smoke didn't entirely clear out. Carbon monoxide poisoning ain't no joke. As the fire sputtered to life, I sat down to take a breather on the bench. It was a pretty cozy little cabin, the kind of place you'd stay in a night or two when going fishing. I could imagine my dad warming his hands by that fire. I lost him in 2010, but that was the kind of place he'd always been most at home in. As I warmed my hands, watching my shadows grow longer, I could imagine him sitting next to me. I could almost hear him. And in that moment, my eyes drifted to a space right in front of the fireplace. A space where a small iron plate protected the floor. I don't know what drove me to look closer, but I realized there were no screws or nails keeping the plate down. So with a quick touch of the fire poker, it came loose, revealing a sort of makeshift metal box. There were 4 items in total inside. A broken pocket watch, an empty hip flask, 3 spent shotgun shells, and a small journal. I went straight for the journal, checking for a name. It was getting darker outside, so I huddled around the fire. As snow began to tap against the wooden barricades, I had 2 choices: to steal this journal, or to read it by the fire as the storm raged on. It was my cold feet that decided that for me. I took off my shoes and warmed them by the fire. As I started to slowly read my way through the rough cursive text of the old journal, not the kind of job I'd imagine I'd do at a law firm, but things never quite go the way you've planned. I opened the first page, hoping to find a name. Instead, I was greeted by a strange text. Journal written by. Then nothing. That was it. No name. Just that. I turned the book over, back and forth. No name anywhere. I kept reading. First page reads as follows. I once had name and creed, a couple of truths thrown to the grave long before my end. Now I remain battered and empty. My history is unusual as my mind turns sun-bleached and distant. My heart burns of wrath, but I cannot recall as to why. I turned the page. I couldn't help but to be intrigued, if not for any other reason than to find the name of the author. This house is not my property, and to my recollection, no one has ever lived here. He proceeded to discuss, at length, the part of his history that he did remember. Growing up in Wisconsin, being the son of a shoemaker, little anecdotes of a long life, his first kiss, his first love, his first house. But the further along he tried to remember, the foggier it got. I was starting to think I might never find a name, but I wasn't sure why. At some point, the author recalled something happening. He couldn't explain what, or why, or where, but he could recall something upsetting his routine. Something came to him, and it made him upset. He spoke about putting up barricades, keeping a loaded shotgun at the ready, and locking himself inside for days on end. "It might have been here that I made my stand," he wrote. "It could be, it should be, but I can't say that it was." He would go on to detail some sort of struggle, but he couldn't picture what it was against. The text was so strangely written. I could tell there were segments as if written piece by piece, but it was impossible to tell just how much time had passed between them. Even in the journal, the author lamented on large segments of time randomly missing. I couldn't help but to consider the other items in the box, in particular the spent shotgun shells. The author proceeded to explain how he'd broken the pocket watch, as it had frustrated him. He was losing track of time. He might think 10 minutes had passed, only realized the entire afternoon was gone. He broke his watch as a reminder that he couldn't trust himself anymore. "Maybe I'll remember that," he wrote, "or will the watch unbreak itself?" I was disrupted from my read by a sudden noise. Looking up, I could see the fire was dying out, but the sound actually came from my phone. Turns out it was my automated "time to go to bed" alert. I've been sitting there for 6 hours. That didn't make sense. I stood up clutching the journal. There was nothing there. The cabin was empty, but I couldn't escape this sudden sense of dread. Like something awful had just happened, but I couldn't say exactly what. Looking down on the journal, I suddenly realized that I felt exactly as described by the author. I felt this unexplainable anxiousness, like that uneasy feeling you get when you feel that someone is watching you, only more palpable. Standing up, with my back to the fireplace, I continued reading. He continued to explain how his flask was empty, but that he couldn't remember drinking from it. He detailed his plans to conceal a few items, along with his journal, for an entire day, just to see if he could remember to retrieve it. "But not yet," he lamented. "There are trespassers to deal with." This was where the spent shells came into play. The author revealed how he'd found a group of strange trespassers. He'd taken them all out with his shotgun. He wrote in detail about shooting 3 times, but that he couldn't remember anything about them. Men, women, or children, there was no way to tell. "I buried them by the barn," he detailed. "It seemed like the right thing to do. Why am I crying?" As the journal neared its end, the author tried to summarize his remaining thoughts. Something came to him, wherever he was. It did something, and as a result, everything was destroyed. He was devastated, but couldn't even remember why. It was like muscle memory. Something in his body was remembering the sadness. "I inscribe upon this door," he wrote, "that no one has ever lived here. I do not recall this place or anyone living here. It serves as a warning and a reminder that this is not my home." And with a final page, the author documented putting it all in a sort of hidden lockbox in front of the fire. He would do so for one day, to see if he couldn't remember retrieving it. Evidently, he couldn't. With the final words on the final page, he gave one last piece of insight, perhaps in a moment of clarity. "It started when I lit the fire," he wrote. "Everything turned worse after I lit the fire." Looking back at the fireplace and the sputtering logs, I slowly came to the realization of what kind of situation I'd put myself in. I had accidentally followed the footsteps of a man who used to be in that cabin. A man that might have owned it, but couldn't even remember it. Or who knows, maybe he was just passing by. I decided to take my chances and just leave. I brought the journal along, opened the door, and prepared to brave the weather. But something happened right then and there. Something made me stop, and I just stood there. I stood there long enough for my hands to turn blue, and I only snapped out of it when a snowflake hit my eye. I wasn't alone. There was something there, and it was doing something to me. I had rung the damn dinner bell. Thinking about it, it feels a bit like being eaten alive. Not physically, but the same feeling remains. This heedless consumption. Something taking an intimate part of what makes you into you and tearing it away. That's what I still remember. That's what it feels like. But it is hard to explain something I can't remember. It feels like a void in your mind, but you have this instinct to fill it with something bad. Like watching a scary movie and knowing something horrifying is about to pop up. Every time I think about it, trying to picture it in my mind, I get that same feeling. Sometimes my mind fills it as a sort of organic darkness, roughly shaped as a person. Other times it's just some guy. It changes whenever I look back at it, because there's nothing there for me to remember, so my mind fills in the blanks. But who's to say that all those blanks are false? I turned around and realized I'd been exposed to this thing. It was doing something to me, and it was bad enough to make me run headfirst into the dark. Looking back at this, all I really remember feeling was that immense panic. A prey reflex, like trying to escape a wild animal. I ended up in the old barn, where I hid behind a mound of debris next to one of the collapsed walls. My fingers were freezing, but I was going to call for help no matter what. Only problem was I couldn't remember the code to unlock the phone. I tried, but between my fingers being too cold to register and something unfathomable approaching from just around the corner, I decided it was better to hunker down and be quiet. Because while I can't remember anything about the physical features of it, I remember thinking it wasn't very perceptive for some reason. It passed me by, but I couldn't make any sounds without revealing my position. Calling for help was out of the question. Instead, I turned my attention back to the journal. My lock screen had a bright picture blurred in the background, allowing me to use it as a makeshift mini flashlight of sorts. For some reason, I wasn't afraid that the creature would spot me visually. Perhaps it didn't have eyes? I turned the pages back and forth, looking for a particular segment. There was something about the weapon the author had used to deal with the intruders that left me wondering, but I could barely make out anything in that journal. Between my pounding heart, my freezing hands, and the strange thing lurking about, I couldn't make heads or tails of the damn cursive text. I can't remember what kind of sounds the creature made, but I can remember the sounds that the environment made when it passed. I remember wood splintering as something climbed the walls. I remember creaking wood from a sudden weight coming down. I remember a door splintering as it was torn from its hinges. Finally, I found the page I was looking for. Just after talking about how he didn't know why he was sad about killing the intruders, the author wrote, "I threw the damn thing into the hayloft. I have not been able to retrieve it, as the memory of its shape eludes me. How does one recognize a weapon that one has no recollection of ever wielding?" I waited for the entity to step outside before I made my way upstairs. It is a strange feeling trying to balance the instinct to run with the obsessive thought of staying quiet. Every creaking floorboard sent shivers down my spine, curling my toes in anticipation of something running me down. But nothing happened. It didn't take long for me to find it. An old double-barreled hunting rifle. Looking over it, I saw that there was some sort of shell still loaded. Perhaps it'd work. Perhaps not. I was no expert, and I didn't have much of a choice but to try. I'd be a sitting duck out there without it. After all, I couldn't remember where I'd parked my car. I decided to go on the offensive. I made my way down the stairs a little too quick. Before long, I heard this scurrying noise as something entered the old barn. I remember standing a good 15 feet away from it and raising the weapon towards it. It stopped, but so did I. For a while, we just sort of circled one another. I remember my movement being in response to a threat. Is this eat or play?" I asked. "If this is you eating, I bet all those memories disappear after a while. Digested. Then you wouldn't remember what this is or what it does. But you do, don't you?" I remember tapping the rifle for emphasis. There was a long pause, but I can't remember why. Did it respond? Could it talk? "If you're just playing, then you might remember that this thing is loaded," I continued. "And you might know what it does. You saw what happened when he used it, you heard it." A shorter pause. We stopped circling. I gripped the weapon tighter and stepped forward, advancing. If this was a consumer and it worked in any way like we do, it would absorb and convert what it fed on into some sort of nutrient. But if it was just collecting, for some reason, then it would have this archive of thoughts to recollect from. That was my reasoning. Or maybe it was just clever. Maybe it was just as clever as I was. I made my way back outside. Even in the newly fallen snow, I managed to find what remained of the path I'd made when I first got there. I walked backwards down the path, my rifle steadily aimed at something. I didn't want to pull the trigger. If it misfired or I missed, I was dead. Just having the means of defending myself was enough to keep it away, for now. I think it had left some sort of toxin in me. Despite not being anywhere near me, I still felt the effects of it. I kept falling into this sort of fugue state, getting turned around and losing grip of where I was going, and why. At one point I was just standing there, gawking at the dark as my rifle thumped to the ground. But there, in the dark, a memory surfaced. The same memory I'd felt back at that cabin. Thoughts of my dad taking me fishing. Back then we'd worn rubber boots, and instead of snow there was mud. It was still deep and I had to walk the same way that I did in the snow. Maybe that's what triggered the memory to begin with. I tried to keep that image in my head, the anticipation as we gathered our bait, learning how to tie a proper knot, getting the correct measurements for the distance between the hook, the weight, and the bobber. I could almost hear the spinning fishing line as the red and white bobbers sailed across the lake. Just holding on to something I knew I couldn't forget was all I needed. It became this sort of bedrock, keeping me from completely losing my mind and focus. I could keep going, holding on to something I knew to be true. It was a backstop, keeping me from losing track. I grabbed the rifle and pressed on. As I did, I remembered something rustling the nearby trees, retreating into the woods. By the time I made it back to my car, the toxin had completely taken hold of me. At that point, I had little to nothing to hold on to, but for a few cherished memories. I crawled into my car, locked all the doors, and tucked myself into a fetal position in the back seat, still clutching the rifle. My body didn't know how to react. I was hot, cold, wide awake, and deeply unconscious, all seemingly at random. I would lose my sense of object permanence, bobbing my head back and forth, completely forgetting what I was doing and what was even happening. At one point, something made the passenger door creak. Maybe someone tried to open it. Luckily, all doors were locked and I had the keys. I remember laying in the back of the car, raising the rifle. Then there was a pause. A long one. Something made me shake my head. It made me angry and afraid. Very afraid. It left me with the sense of a rabbit being stared down by a pack of wolves. I had something it wanted. Something it deeply valued. Again, this creature is just this nothingness. I can't recall what it looked like or if it was even a physical being. From context, I think it could talk. I think it said something to me that I didn't want to hear. And to this day, when I think of it, my mind just conjures these otherworldly horrors. Teeth, skin, claws. But I didn't lower my rifle. Not for a second. I didn't try my luck and I didn't challenge fate. And by the time the sun rose, it was gone. And with it went the sweats, the confusion, and much of the memory voids. First thing I did was check the shotgun shell. Turns out, it was already spent. Empty. That leaves a lot of questions. Uncomfortable ones. If that thing was just collecting, it would have known that I couldn't hurt it. If it knew that, why did it let me go? Did I trade it something? How would I even know? But if it was just feeding, then how did it know to stay away from the rifle? I have managed to put the story together piece by piece. Some of my memories are still a bit touch and go, but this is my most complete retelling I can make. I've tried to fill in as many blanks as I can, but it's hard. I kept the journal. I think I still have it somewhere. I showed it to my boss, but it was a weak comfort. The client eventually ended up choosing another site, leaving us in an awful position. Needless to say, that trip didn't get me promoted. That happened years later. Yeah, I still work there. Same firm. I get the feeling that this thing didn't just make people forget things. It made people be forgotten too. Despite all my efforts, not a single person I've met or talked to can remember anyone ever hearing anything about the people who used to live here. Even the cleric at the municipal office kept forgetting I'd even made the request to inquire about the land to begin with. That might have just been laziness though. But I get this feeling that I'm missing something. Even though I've wrapped my head around most of this, and most of what happened out there, I often get the feeling that I lost something. In those moments, when everything in the world feels uncertain and half true, I look back at that day with my dad. I listen to the spinning of the fishing line. But here's the thing, Reddit. This is what bothers me. This is what made me want to post, to kind of save this for posterity, like a journal of my own, hidden by my own fireplace. Lately, I can't remember what my dad's eyes looked like. Am I just forgetting? Or is something forgetting it for me? And that was No One Has Ever Lived in This House by Saturday over on Reddit r/NoSleep. Man, it's a very interesting thought, isn't it? It kind of ties into the whole idea of the fear of the unknown, But this is kind of like a little bit more tangible with it. The fact that like you have these snippets of a memory really, and you can't fully remember the reason behind why you're forgetting so many things, like basically eating away at your memories. It's like a horrifying concept, isn't it, to actually put it in a more physical form. Very interesting little tale. I really enjoyed it. I hope you did too. We'll see you for the next one. Take care. Don't move. I was lounging in the armchair at the end of my day, watching the nightly news like I usually do. The fireplace in the old rickety place cast a warm glow across the room, challenging the cold blue of the grainy television. The beer bottle I'd been sipping on had sat empty by my side for the past 30 minutes. I was too damn lazy to get up and grab another, and yet I couldn't help stealing longing glances over and over at the empty bottle. Ferocious dilemma, one that suited the somber, pitiful state of my life. The TV flickered again, making that sudden thrashing sound old sets are wont to do. And the old clock on the wall kept ticking with each passing sound. I grabbed my phone off the armrest, hoping hopelessly for a message that I knew wasn't coming. Again, there was nothing. Nothing but the last text from my wife 3 days prior, telling me sternly not to bother coming home, and to instead spend a while at the family cabin. Things had been rough between us for a while, what with my drinking and being away as often as I was for work. Even when I'd get home after a business trip, I'd be too tired and too stressed to be a proper husband. And I suppose she's had it with all that. So she decided it was best we took some time apart. And so here I was, alone, and somewhat confused at how I ended up here in the woods at a time when hardly anyone was on vacation. The TV flickered again, seemingly louder this time, and the old clock kept ticking, its gentle sound somehow rising above the murmur of the nightly news. And then my phone went off. It was the sweetest sound in the world, to hear it after 3 days of radio silence. I didn't have many friends, so I knew who it had to be, though I was surprised she was up so late as it was midnight. I quickly reached over again and opened my messages. To my disappointment, it wasn't my wife. It was some odd number I'd never seen. I opened the message and was met by 2 bold words. Don't move. I instinctively looked over my shoulder at the shadowed kitchen and staircase behind me. A brief moment passed before a stupid grin broke out on my face. I had gotten some kind of spam text message and actually let it spook me for a second. A few too many drinks, I supposed. There was, of course, nothing out of the ordinary in the cabin. Outside in the woods, things were even quieter, and the only thing I'd ever seen out there was the odd doe. Years ago, the estranged uncle I'd inherited the cabin from had talked about the place being tainted somehow, but none of us really took him seriously. He was always an odd one and wasn't on good terms with most of us. I turned back to the TV for a while before deciding to call it a night. The TV flickered as I shut it off, and all that remained was the sound of the old clock's ticking. I awoke the next morning, stiff in the cold. The fire had gone out partway through the night, and I'd forgotten to add to it. I put on my slippers and groaned my way down to the kitchen, joints aching and creaking. It was a brisk morning, and a thick layer of snow had settled outside. I started brewing a pot of coffee before reigniting the fireplace. Coffee always came first. Once I'd warmed up by the fire and finished my coffee, I decided to go for a walk. I'd always loved snowy mornings, chilly as they were. I also thought I'd take a photo or two on my phone to post online. Who knows, maybe my wife would see the post and loosen up a bit. She still hadn't responded to any of my calls or messages since the beginning of my exile. Unfortunately for me, it was colder than I'd thought. That kind of cold that shoots through your layers and chills you to the bone. I just snapped a quick picture of the snow-covered roadway leading away from the cabin before heading back in. The trees lining the road were glistening in the morning sun. It was a great shot, I thought. My phone went off again as soon as I stepped back into the cabin. Much to my dismay, it was another odd number I'd never seen. You did this. This time I was just annoyed. Could these ridiculous messages stop getting my hopes up? I paid it no mind and settled back into my armchair. It was time to get started on my paperwork, but not before uploading that photo right quick. As I pulled up the picture on my phone, I noticed something strange. There was some sort of crimson stain in the snow right near the base of the front porch. I hadn't noticed anything when I was out there initially, though this thing seemed hard to miss. It just didn't look right. It was too vibrant against the snow. I stepped back out to take a look. When I saw the bright red stain, I immediately assumed it was a rabbit carcass or some such. The poor thing had probably become the meal of some predator the night before. But as I brushed aside the snow and saw what it had concealed, I gasped and toppled back right onto my ass. After I'd regained my composure and brushed the snow off my backside, I reached forward and begrudgingly lifted the thing off the ground. It was a finger, and as far as I could tell, a human finger. It was missing most of its skin, so it was hard to be sure. A tiny little thing, but the amount of blood around it was disturbing. Why the hell was I finding this here? Did an injured hiker come by last night in search of help? I'd always been a deep sleeper, so I could easily have missed something like that. Or perhaps it wasn't a human finger, but instead belonged to some poor animal. Naturally, I found it unsettling that I had discovered something so strange immediately after receiving an equally odd text message. But I wasn't about to start jumping to ridiculous conclusions. It was a coincidence, and neither the silly message nor the poor sod that lost his finger were a concern of mine. I had work to do, so I tossed the thing back into the snow, opting to let nature run its course, and settled back inside. I ended up posting the photo anyways, and much to my pleasure, nobody seemed to notice the anomaly. My brother and a couple of my work colleagues commented, expressing jealousy at my impromptu vacation. Most importantly, my wife hit the like button on the picture. She wasn't ready to talk yet, but she couldn't help but appreciate my post. Progress was being made. After an otherwise uneventful day of getting paperwork done, I settled down in the living room with a few beers. I watched a couple movies before tossing on the news like usual to round out the night. It was at midnight that I once again heard my phone go off. I fumbled to pull my phone out of my pocket. I opened up the message. Don't move. I admit that this time I felt a chill run up my spine when I read those words. I knew it was some sort of silly spam message and that it wasn't worth my time, but some part of me felt inclined to listen to the message. I set my phone down and sat still with my eyes on the TV. The TV flickered again. The old clock on the wall ticked away. And suddenly I heard some sort of tumbling sound above me, somewhere upstairs. I assured myself that it was probably a loose object in the closet falling over, or maybe some sort of critter that had managed to get into the cabin. Still, I didn't move. My thoughts were racing, but my eyes were fixed on the TV in front of me, and I wasn't moving. Then I heard the rhythmic thumping of footsteps. Not natural, steady footsteps, but erratic footsteps, like what you'd expect to hear if someone above you was struggling to walk with a broken ankle. My eyes grew wide, and the hairs on my body stood on end. The TV flickered again. The soft murmur of the news had melted into meaningless gibberish in my mind. The clock's ticking was louder than ever, and the footsteps above me creeped towards the staircase, which was behind me and out of sight. All I could see while sitting in the armchair was the TV in front of me, the fireplace to my left, and the clock on the wall to my right. It was a small nook of a room, with the rest of the cabin behind me. Unable to see what was happening, and hearing the skittish footsteps reach the top of the stairs, I decided I was done with the whole not moving thing. I darted up and spun to face the shadowy kitchen and staircase. I couldn't see or hear anything, so I took a deep breath and walked towards the stairs. I flipped the light switch and stood prepared to deal with whoever or whatever had broken into my house. But there was nothing there. The staircase was empty, and nothing was at the top of it. I went upstairs and looked around. I checked the washroom, the bedroom, and inspected the bedroom closet. It was a compact and cozy cabin with few rooms, so it would have been easy to notice if something was awry. But everything was in its place. Nothing had fallen over, nothing seemed disturbed. Ultimately, I chalked it up to being a mouse or raccoon that somehow got inside and then left the same way it came. Honestly felt a bit ridiculous for getting spooked the way I had over something trivial. Thankfully, there wasn't anyone with me to witness the incident. I'd never have heard the end of it. I tidied up for the night and settled into bed. As I switched off the bedside lamp and sunk into my pillow, I thought of my wife, and felt grateful that I at least got something from her that day. I felt better because of that than I had the entire time since being kicked out. I drifted off with the tranquil sounds of the forest dancing in my ears, comfortable and at peace. My phone went off in the morning while I was still in bed. I squinted at it and saw that the number was, once again, one that I didn't recognize. My heart began to race as I recalled the previous night's events, and started to wonder what this new message might be. I opened my phone to look. You did this. My eyes flashed around the room for a moment. There was nothing out of the ordinary, and the window was curtained. I started to wonder what these messages could mean. If maybe they weren't just unwanted spam. Was someone pranking me? The bed creaked something fierce as I sat up and got dressed. I didn't want to take the messages too seriously, but I felt compelled to at least take a look around outside. I descended the stairs into the kitchen and completely froze at the bottom step, looking over at the counter. I couldn't tell what I was looking at. My stomach turned as my eyes slowly scanned the meaty object on the countertop. There was a lot of blood, enough that it was audibly dripping off the counter. Chunks of flesh were missing, and I could see bits of bone showing beneath the tissue. I swallowed stiffly as I realized what it was I was looking at. A bloody, mutilated leg, was sitting on the counter, and it was more than likely a human leg. My blood ran cold. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. My eyes were stuck on the revolting sight before me as my mind and heart raced. I thought back to the message I'd received. You did this. I'd written off the incident with the finger the previous day, but this time there was no mistaking it. Something profoundly wrong was happening here. I stumbled backwards, making all too much noise as I scrambled back up the stairs. I thumped my way into the bedroom and threw myself inside the closet before sliding the closet door shut. I barely fit in there, but there wasn't any better place to hide, and I was absolutely terrified. I tried to quiet my shaky breathing as I pulled my phone out of my pocket. The previous message seemed to glare right through me. You did this. First the finger and now an entire leg. And the leg was inside the cabin. Someone had broken in and placed that there. I considered that maybe the body parts were prosthetics. Perhaps some elaborate prank was being taken way too far, and I was the butt of the joke. In any case, I was not going to sit around and just let it go on. I needed to get out of there. After a solid 30 minutes of quietly hiding in the closet, I had built up the courage to set out. I hadn't heard a single sound throughout the house other than the ticking of the clock downstairs and the dripping of blood off the countertop. I left the bedroom and slowly, cautiously made my way down the stairs. I frantically looked around the kitchen and living room. I tried not to fixate on the leg. I ducked past each window and peeked outside, searching for any sign of whoever it was that was toying with me. There was nothing out of the ordinary. But then I was in the woods, where it would be all too easy for someone to hide. My truck was parked in front of the cabin off to the side of the road. I decided it was time to leave. I started towards the front door when my phone went off again. I gingerly pulled it out of my pocket, my hand trembling as I looked at the message. Don't leave. Some cold carnal instinct in me felt obliged to listen to the message. I quickly dismissed that feeling and blasted out of the front door, sprinting to my truck. I got in, slammed the door, jammed the key into the ignition, and turned the key. Nothing happened. I twisted the ignition back and forth in a panic, but my truck wasn't responding in the slightest. I lifted my head and frantically swiveled around, trying to get a look at something, anything that might explain what was happening to me. Then my phone went off again. You did this. Not again, I thought. Not again. Through the terror and the disgust I'd been feeling, I had started to feel something even worse. Guilt. When I considered that the body parts in and around my home could be real, it naturally had started to sink in that those body parts belonged to someone. Someone was paying the price for my transgressions against whoever or whatever was making demands of me. I looked back at the cabin. The front door was open. I couldn't remember if I had left it open, though. As I contemplated my next move, the guilt kept building. Was someone, possibly a stray hiker or camper, being tortured and murdered as part of some sick game that I had been roped into? If so, could I live with myself if I were to continue disobeying the messages? I quickly realized that, in any case, there was no way for me to leave. The distance I'd have to cover on foot was insurmountable, especially with the recent snow. It was also bitterly cold out, and I felt exposed. I figured my best option was to head back into the cabin to regroup before contacting my wife or my brother in hopes of being picked up. My knees shook pitifully as I plodded back towards the cabin. I knew I was being watched at this point, and the knowledge left me feeling vulnerable in a way that made my stomach turn. When I neared the cabin and saw that there was a blood trail leading inside from the front porch, my stomach turned again, and I lurched forward, vomiting into the snow. I wiped my face with my sleeve before stepping back into the cabin. The blood trail led to the back side of my armchair in the living room, where a human arm was placed vertically, resting against the chair as though it had been neatly placed there. The arm was missing one finger, but was otherwise intact. It was cut, or torn, rather, just below the shoulder. Tissue dangled from the stump. It looked as though it had been ripped off with tremendous force. I glanced from the arm back over to the leg on my countertop before throwing up again. Once I'd expunged what little bile was left in my stomach, I tried to collect myself. I couldn't stand the sight, the smell, or the dripping sounds of the horrors any longer. I decided that I simply had to toss the body parts outside before washing up and trying to get in touch with someone. As I carried out my godforsaken task, I couldn't help but notice how utterly real the body parts seemed. If this was some elaborate prank, the pranksters were experts. But as that deep chill rose within me again, I felt that this was no prank, and that these were no props. Once I was done, I texted my wife, then my brother. I didn't want to go into too much detail at that point, so I just explained to them that I wasn't feeling well and really needed a ride back into the city. I waited a minute before my phone went off twice in quick succession. Message failed to send. Please try again later. My heart sank again. My truck was somehow disabled and my phone wasn't working. I tried calling instead of text messaging, but was met with a similar error. My internet connection was entirely out as well. I suspected immediately that this was all a part of the sick game I was stuck in. I was scared. I was alone. I didn't know what to do. The words, "Don't leave," echoed in my mind. The guilt continued to build, and that carnal instinct remained. Something deep inside me told that I needed to listen to the commands I was receiving. I lost track of time as I paced back and forth, fraught with worry and too anxious to sit still. None of the subsequent text messages or calls I tried to send successfully went through. I had tried my wife and brother several times, and even resorted to trying a few co-workers and family friends. No luck whatsoever. All my communications were blocked. Once I finally broke out of the panicked prison of my mind, I realized that the sun had set and saw that everything outside was nearly pitch black. I frantically started closing every curtain in the cabin. Unfortunately, as soon as I'd regained some sense of safety and privacy, something awful happened. All at once, the power in the cabin went out. I was standing in absolute darkness. In that moment, I felt terror unlike anything I'd ever experienced in my life. All I could hear was my racing heartbeat, my labored breath, and the ever-vigilant ticking of the old clock on the wall. When the TV suddenly turned on, I damn near jumped out of my skin. It was an older set, so the blue light didn't light up the cabin all too well. All I could see was the outline of my armchair and the rug on the living room floor. The lights had not come back on, yet, sure as day, the TV was on. And before the power had gone out, I was certain I wasn't watching TV. Hell, I hadn't touched the remote since the previous day with the things I've been through since. My phone went off again. I knew this time that this wasn't going to be a message from my wife or my brother, or anyone else that I'd have been so very happy to talk to. I slowly looked at the new message. Sit down. It was nearly without hesitation that I listened to the command. I felt as though part of me had decided hours earlier that I wasn't going to disobey anymore. I sat in the armchair and fixed my eyes on the TV. It flickered loudly, interrupting the news anchor as it was wont to do. And the clock on the wall kept ticking away, seemingly louder than any clock had any right to tick. My phone went off again. I had it at the ready this time. I knew this was coming. Don't move. Despite my terror, I felt resigned at that point. I was mortified but defeated, and that cold feeling in me begged me not to move. So I sat there, eyes fixed on the TV, breathing as steadily as I was able. I resolved not to move, even as a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. Then I heard thumping upstairs. It was louder this time than it had been previously. The previous days thought that the sound might be a raccoon or a mouse seemed miles away. The skittish, deranged footsteps broke out above me, just like last time, but this time they were quicker, angrier. The TV flickered and the damn clock's ticking somehow rivaled even the sound of the frantic footsteps above me. As the footsteps reached the top of the staircase, I noticed I was shaking. I tried to steady my breathing and hold still as best I could. Whatever it was at the top of the stairs began to descend, seemingly stumbling and stamping on each step. It slowed as it neared the bottom of the staircase. My heart was pounding so hard in my chest that I thought I might literally die of fear. Just then the TV flickered violently before breaking out into raw static and white noise. It ruthlessly shattered the relative silence of the cabin. The clock's ticking grew so loud in my ears that it began to hurt, and I started to feel as though the air in the cabin was rushing. The air was tugging on the organs in my body, making them feel out of place. The pressure was nauseating. I heard a loud crash behind me, and the TV grew louder. The clock wouldn't stop ticking. The air kept rushing. I noticed tears trickling down from my wide, horrified eyes. The angry footsteps that had subsided for a moment suddenly broke into a frantic, scampering run. I heard them cover the distance from the staircase to the back of my chair in less than a second. At the same time, I heard an awful, monotone, croaking voice grow nearer. Yes, 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 yes. I cried out in horror and leapt out of the chair. I was gasping and howling as I violently spun and threw my arms out in hopes of defending myself. But all at once, everything was normal. The lights were on. The news anchor on the TV was murmuring something about a new traffic law. The clock was ticking quietly. It wasn't as though things had returned to normal in an instant. No, it was as though nothing was wrong to begin with. There was nothing in the cabin with me. The power seemed fine on all the appliances and lights. It was like waking from a nightmare and realizing it was only a dream. Except it was not a dream. As much as I wish it had been, I was wide awake the entire time. Something or someone had been in the cabin with me. Something had affected the lights, the TV. My ears still rung from how loud it was all moments before, and I felt sick to my stomach from the way the rushing air had tugged on my guts. I fell onto my hands and knees and retched violently, but nothing came up. Once I'd finished gagging, I started to sob. I curled sideways into a ball on the rug and hugged myself as I cried, and without meaning to, I drifted to sleep. I awoke when my phone went off. For a brief, beautiful moment, I forgot where I was and what had been happening to me. Then a bitter feeling of emptiness settled firmly in my gut as I recalled the previous night's events. I felt wretched. The dampness around my waist told me that I had wet myself in my sleep. Every joint in my body ached. I just about started to cry again before collecting myself. As I reached for my phone on the bedside table, it occurred to me that something was not right. I didn't recall moving to the bedroom the previous night. Yet here I was, soaked and stinking, but comfortable, at least, in bed. The last thing I remembered from the previous night was sobbing while laying on the living room floor. Too tired to give it any more thought, I checked the message. You did this. In all my bewilderment, I had forgotten that this was coming. I had moved, after all. I'd given in to my terror and jumped out of the chair the night before, and for that there was always going to be a consequence. Somewhere downstairs or outside I was going to find something terrible. I closed my eyes and took a few deep breaths. I didn't have the courage to get up, to face what was down there. Not yet. I rolled over to try to get a little more rest. But my leg bumped into something solid and moist. I abruptly pulled away, scurrying off the opposite side of the bed. When I looked down on the sheets, I could see that I had not wet myself after all. The bed was soaked in crimson. The blood had stained my clothing as well. I was covered in it. I slowly pulled the sheets from the bed. I slowly uncovered the gory flesh under the covers, and I was devastated when I saw the extent of it. This was an entire mutilated torso, with one arm and one leg still attached to it. Feeling delirious at that point, I threw the covers back over the abomination and rushed downstairs. The curtains were open, and it was pitch black outside. I wasn't sure how long I had slept for, but it was clearly night, and I suspected I'd be getting another message soon enough. I decided then that it was time to see things through. I felt hollow and my will was crushed. I would no longer defy the messages. I didn't have it in me to do so. If following through resulted in my gruesome death, then so be it, I thought. I was done. Whatever or whoever I was dealing with had me sorely outmatched. I was a helpless victim and I didn't stand a chance of fighting back or escaping. The power throughout the cabin went out again. The darkness that consumed the place didn't feel natural. It was as though it reached inside me. The TV burst on with a loud series of flickers. The news anchor's murmur sounded like total gibberish to me, like a preacher speaking in tongues. Like clockwork, my phone went off. Sit down. I sat down. It went off again. Don't move. I fixed my eyes on the TV across the living room and held still. Tears began to build in my eyes, but I did not tremble. I was more sad than scared. The thumping above me began. At the exact same time, the old clock's ticking rose from a soft click to a thundering boom, as if a large bass drum was being hammered right next to my head. I thought I felt blood trickling out of my ears, but I did not move. The scurrying footsteps were seething with rage this time. They crossed the floor above me at a deliberate pace. As they reached the top of the stairs, the TV flickered terribly before devolving into pure static and white noise. The sound inside of it was disturbing. I felt the static under my skin. It made me itchy. With each vile footfall down the staircase, I heard that awful croaking voice. Yes, 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 yes. The air in the room started to rush around me. The pressure was unbearable. My innards felt as though they would evacuate my body. The TV grew louder. It sounded less like static and more like the tortured howl of a mortally wounded man, and the clock's booming continued to deafen. Despite all of that, the sound of the entity behind me was crystal clear as it reached the bottom of the stairs. I braced myself for what I knew was coming, blinking away tears but remaining otherwise still, my eyes fixed firmly on the screaming TV set. With unnatural speed, the thing behind me scurried across the cabin, heading straight for the back of my armchair. Its croak turned into a stifled screech as it approached. Yes, 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 yes. I bit into my lip hard enough to flood my mouth with blood. I thought that I was likely going to die. I sunk my nails into the armrests of my chair hard enough to tear the fabric, but still I did not move. In an instant I felt an overwhelming rush move through my body. It was as though the entire cabin, no, the entire earth had lurched forward. And suddenly everything was normal. The lights were on, the fireplace was crackling to my left, the news anchor on the TV was interviewing an expert over some social issue, and the old clock on the wall was ticking peacefully. I sat still for hours, eyes fixed on the TV. The taste of iron in my mouth was making me ill, and the blood in my ears had become crusty. But I didn't feel compelled or ready to move, to do anything. Once there was sunlight shining through the curtains, I finally turned my head to look outside. I could hear the early spring birds singing. It was a beautiful day. My phone hadn't gone off. Hours had passed. Dawn had arrived, and still I hadn't received a message accosting me for defying previous demands. I suppose I had satisfied the entity that had been toying with me. When I did grab my phone, I noticed a couple old messages from my wife. It hadn't gone off, I was sure of that, but the messages were there unchecked nonetheless. She was simply asking me to come home. Tentatively the first time, then as more of a demand in the second message. A demand that I was all too happy to oblige. I needed to get out of there. Now. I gathered my things, changed into a fresh pair of clothes, and stepped outside. I gulped a few big breaths of fresh mountain air before starting towards my truck. Something told me it was going to work just fine now, and much to my pleasure, it started without a hitch. The 3-hour drive home left me plenty of time to think. I thought about everything that had happened over the previous week, the horrors I'd endured. I thought about how I'd probably need to speak with the police and somehow explain the grisly scene back at the cabin. But mostly I just felt empty. I didn't feel afraid, I didn't feel guilty, I didn't feel disgusted. I just felt hollow and broken. Like a damaged clock that's arm was jammed, doomed to forever tick in the same spot, never moving forward. Despite all of that, there was a warmth to finally seeing my apartment building loom in the distance after all I'd been through. I felt eager to try to start fresh with my wife and leave all the madness of the past week behind me. I wanted to just forget it all and get on with my life. The ascent up to the 20th floor took far longer than it rightfully should have. The elevator felt too small. It was agitating. I was relieved to step out once I'd arrived at my floor. I took another deep breath as I walked down the hall, shaking off the discomfort. I heard the din of our neighbors going about their lives. It was comforting to be in the city and around people again. Finally, I reached my suite. I unlocked the door and opened it. "I'm home," I said, grateful for the familiar aroma of my safe place. My wife was sitting on the dinner table, smiling at me. It was so nice to finally see her smile. There was just one thing that wasn't right. She was missing an arm. Oh, she was also missing a leg. In fact, she was missing most of her body. The only thing that was sitting on the tabletop was her smiling head, her grin reflecting off the pool of crimson beneath her. And that was Don't Move by Mo Wanders. Man, another great little story by Mo. Man, it's just it's crazy, right? So what would that entity have been when you really kind of like try to break it down? Because it's making me think of like, so it has a way to kind of trap you in, I suppose, your own bubble, right? This weird bubble, but it's not always, or is it? I don't know. Maybe it was kind of like the moment he entered because he wasn't able to really message anybody. I don't know, man. I really don't know. That's so fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. And yet again, when it finally did reach him, something he could never see himself, what happened? You know? Did it enter him, possess him in some kind of a way? Is it now attached to him in some kind of form? I don't know. but obviously it still had the capability of actually being able to harm somebody. And the fact that it like tore up his wife and stuff, that's crazy, isn't it? Just just horrifying. Just horrifying. What a great little story. I really, really enjoyed it. I hope you did too. See you for the next one. Cheers, Mo. Thank you. The Room with the Train. This story is not about a ghost, or an encounter with a creepy stranger. It's not even about a near-death experience or something like that. As a matter of fact, I was never in danger during the event I'm about to tell you about. Nonetheless, it's a disturbing memory that I will carry with me until the day I die. I grew up in a small city, the kind of place you could barely call a town if it wasn't for the sheer number of people living there. Downtown was only a couple of blocks long, and in the middle of it was one of the biggest buildings in the area. It was a local movie theater named after the city. I remember going there when I was very young, about 7 years old, and watching the first Pokemon movie. It was probably nothing compared to the theaters we have nowadays, but back then it was huge for me. I loved it. So, when a few years later I heard the cinema was going out of business, I felt really sad about it. The building was sold to a religious group that used it for their services. You know the type. Loud music, big crowds with their arms in the air singing prayers, some having seizures on stage while the pastor yelled through a mic. Every time I walked past the old cinema, I would see the announcements of the congregation where the movie posters would have been, and if they were in session, you could hear them singing from the other side of the street. This group owned the cinema for nearly a decade, until the local government bought back the building in order to restore it as a historical landmark of the city. When this happened, I was studying construction, with the intent to follow architecture or civil engineering at college, and my class was very lucky to be involved with the cinema's restoration project because two of our teachers were architects working on it. I will always remember the day we went to visit the old cinema. Our class was small, only a handful of students, but we were all around the same age, so we all shared childhood memories of when the cinema was operational. We ran through the corridors of the auditorium, sat in the chairs just like we did when we were little kids, and began stomping on the wooden floor with our feet, filling the entire room with the echoes of our drumming and our laughter. A little ritual of sorts everyone used to do right before the beginning of the movie. Once nostalgia time was over, we went back to the purpose of the trip, and began to survey the building. We were very excited because that was a unique opportunity to go into the places we would have never been allowed to otherwise, so we made sure to check every last corner, every single room. No matter how far, no matter how obscure. The first one we found was below the stage. On one of the corners, there was a little door. Not very visible, probably because it was meant for maintenance staff only. Behind it, we found a long room filled with rusty boilers, part of the old heating system that was no longer in use. The place was a little creepy, with all of those old tanks and pipes crowding the narrow space. But what we found past them was what really started to freak us out. This room was small, very small. It was, after all, basically just leftover space behind the boilers. Yet it contrasted so much with the rest of the area around it. It may as well have been from a different place altogether. The walls were painted a light color, white I think, but I don't remember it very well because what really got my attention were the drawings in them. There were rainbows, a smiling sun, trees and flowers, and happy little people with smiles on their faces of dotted eyes. It was a daycare. The whole class and teacher gathered to see the discovery. We were all very confused about the strange placing of this room. Okay, we could understand the need for a place to keep the kids that were too little to be amongst the crowd during prayers, or maybe the ones of the people who worked there. But the placing was just odd. The stage was probably one of the loudest places in the auditorium during the services, and this was right below it, so there was no way it could be a quiet place for the children. We left the boilers room and continued our tour through the theater, a little puzzled about our finding, but not giving it too much thought. Outside of the auditorium there were the bathrooms, both in terrible condition, the ticket sale booth, and a huge set of stairs that led to a mezzanine in the auditorium. Half of the seats there were totally ruined due to a water leak in the roof, and I cursed these people for not taking proper care of the building. With that part done, all that was left was the projection room on the third floor. Behind the tickets booth there was a door that led to a spiral stair. I don't remember how tall it actually was, but it must have been over 10 meters of metallic steps without a single resting spot. I wasn't exactly an athlete, but I could walk several kilometers with no problem, and rode on a bike to and from school every single day. Yet by the time I reached the top of the stairs, I was exhausted. And I wasn't the only one. All of my classmates complained about how hard it was to walk up there. After a short break to catch our breath, we moved on to explore the third floor. It was roughly a narrow passageway with a couple of divisions to form different rooms, but it was more than enough for what it was made for. The first room from the stairs was a storage deposit, probably where they kept the movies and other equipment. And except for some trash, it was mostly empty. The second room was the one we were all excited to see, the projector room. The old machine was so big that it was still there, and there were even some pieces scattered around. It was quite a piece of history, and we were all very thrilled to check it out. So no one really bothered to move on to the very last room until we were about to leave. And there we saw it again. There was a train in this one instead of a rainbow. Something was written on it, in big, colorful letters, something about Christ. I can't remember it well. The drawings were a bit old, the paint slightly peeled from the walls, but the colors were just as cheerful as you would expect for a place where children play. My heart sank to my stomach as I came to the realization of what that place really was. The one behind the boilers probably serving the same purpose. I took notice of how isolated that room was, literally the furthest away you could possibly get from everyone else. I thought about the 3 floors of stairs, and imagined what it would have been like to a child to walk all the way up, only to end up in that room, the room with the colorful train in the wall. My classmates and I exchanged horrified expressions, as I knew they were thinking the same. We never visited the theater again, even though we continued with the restoration project for several months, and we never talked about those 2 rooms. Cases of molestation in the church are well known by everyone, to the point that the pedo priest is practically a cliche. But this is the kind of thing you think happens in some place far away, in another city, even in another country. You never imagine it can happen in the very same town you live, the place where you grew up, in the very same building where you once watched a Pokemon movie when you were 7 years old. And that was The Room with the Train on r/free horror stories by Krillitz. Am I saying that right? I might not be. I'm so sorry. Yeah, it really kind of makes you think, doesn't it? About, it's kind of like a darker version of nostalgia. The idea of like certain places that you used to remember. You have rose tinted glasses and everything, and there's like darker secrets behind them. Interesting. I mean, obviously not when it was a cinema, but still, it just kind of warps your like worldview of certain things. You know what I mean? You know what I mean. You know what I'm talking about. I'm not just spamming nonsense. So that was really good. I really enjoyed that. I hope you did too. We'll see you for the next one. Bye bye. Somebody's in there. 5 years ago, my wife gave birth to our youngest child, Toby. We had already had a son and daughter beforehand, and we all lived in a large 2-story house in a cozy little neighborhood, so space was never a problem for us. Eventually, when Toby started potty training, my wife and I told him to knock on the bathroom door to see if anyone was in there for common courtesy. Over time, Toby developed a strange little habit. Whenever someone would knock on the bathroom door, and if he was nearby, he would either say, "Somebody's in there," if someone was in bathroom, or "Nobody's in there," if no one was in there. Now his siblings found his little quirk of his annoying at times, but I paid it no heed. At the near end of November, after Thanksgiving, my wife and I wanted to decorate for Christmas. We were planning on buying new decorations, but we had small Christmas lights somewhere in the basement that we wanted to use. On a Thursday night, my wife took our daughter to the salon while our eldest son was in a study group at the library, so it was just me and Toby in the house. After reviewing our taxes from the last year, I decided to go to the basement to get the Christmas lights so I can set them up before the weather turns worse for wear. I went downstairs to the first floor and crossed the living room where Toby was sitting on the couch watching his favorite cartoon show while absent-mindedly eating a bag of Teddy Grahams. I reached the basement door, and as my hand grasped the doorknob, Toby said, "Somebody's in there." I paused as a slight jolt of shock passed over me. Confusion soon followed as the bathroom was on the other side of the living room, and Toby was still on the couch watching TV. "What did you say, son?" I asked, turning to him. Toby didn't take his eyes off the television when he responded. "Somebody's in there." "In the bathroom?" "No, in the basement," he clarified. Fear ebbed its way into my psyche, which I tried to brush off. "Who's in the basement?" Toby shrugged and grabbed another handful of Teddy Grahams. I turned to the door, my hand still on the doorknob. I stood there as if waiting for someone to walk up the stairs and open the door from the other side. Memories resurfaced of my childhood. Irrational fear of the dark, hiding from the boogeyman from my closet, reading Stephen King and different horror stories of all flavors, the basement of my old house, filled with cobwebs and old antiques that were decades old. How I would hear things down there scurrying, lurking, waiting to jump at me. For a moment, I thought of waiting till tomorrow, during the day, to get the Christmas lights. Or better yet, have my eldest go get them for me. I immediately shook my head. This is ridiculous, I thought. There's no one in the basement. Toby was 5 years old. Children make up these things all the time. It's what they do. I've been to the basement a week before and I've been here all day. Nobody was in there. Defiantly, I opened the basement door. The staircase led to a landing where the stairs continued to the right. The sides of the stairs are walled off so the basement wasn't visible. I then flicked the light switch, but nothing happened. I reflipped the light switch and the lights still wouldn't turn on. I could have sworn I changed the bulbs a month or so ago. Determined to not let my childhood fears get the best of me, I went to the kitchen and fished out a flashlight. After checking if the batteries still worked, I ventured downstairs and stopped on the landing. The light from the living room spilled only to the landing, leaving the rest of the basement in the unnaturally dark. I turned on the flashlight and slowly traversed down the increasingly creaking stairs. Our basement was a cluttered maze of stacked boxes, old furniture, and other forgotten antiques. I searched my mind and vaguely remembered the lights being in a box in the far corner of the room. I maneuvered my way through the clutter, careful not to knock anything over. My ears were perked listening to the abstract silence. As I was halfway through, my nerves were on end. I kept looking at the corner of my eye, ensuring that the shadow next to me was mine alone. I steadied my breathing through my nose to minimize any noise I made. Suddenly, I kicked a nightstand, knocking the lamp on top over. I grabbed it before it hit the ground. The wobble of the nightstand was deafening as well as the silence soon after. Placing the lamp on the table, I continued my search. Fear started to overtake me. I could feel my fight-or-flight senses go haywire, telling me to turn and leave. My courage draining as I actively had to push my reluctant, shaking body forward. I thought I felt my heart stop when I shined my light into a figure in front of me. I backed up into a stacked pile of boxes as my mind was failing to process the terror before my eyes. It had no face. Its body was covered in wild fur. Its arms were outstretched towards me. My toes were curled, ready to run, but then I realized it was a mannequin, wearing a brown fur coat, fuzzy pink scarf, and a feathered hat. I exhaled, hoping the fear would leave with my breath. I felt emotionally exhausted as I passed by the mannequin, and my eyes set on the Christmas lights hanging on top of stacked boxes. I snatched the lights, pulling them out being rather haphazardly. As I started to wrap the lights around my arm, I heard a crash. I turned back immediately, shining a light on the mannequin, which was now facing me. Next to it, 3 boxes lay on the floor, its contents spilling out. At first, I questioned how the mannequin turned towards me, but decided to shrug it off, figuring the falling boxes caused it to turn. Or did it cause the boxes to fall? A random thought popped into my head. I shook it off and made my way past the boxes, not bothering to clean up the mess. As I did, I shrank from the mannequin's outstretched hands, fearing to even let them graze me. I hastened my pace rather quickly this time, not bothering to be careful as I bumped into several things with little regard. Behind I heard crashes as things fell over, followed by a light tapping sound. I rushed further as I realized it sounded like footsteps other than my own. I dared not look back, not wanting to confirm what my mind was conjuring, not wanting to see that stiff form moving towards me. As the footsteps came closer, I started to sprint, jumping over the old couch and knocking over boxes without care. I made it to the stairs and hopped 2 or 3 steps at a time. As I made it to the landing and turned to run up the second staircase, I saw a glimpse of my pursuer. The mannequin was crawling on the stairs after me. Its once stiff hands were now open with jagged ends. Its faceless head stared right at me. I dashed upwards, hand on the railing, which I was grateful for as I slipped on a stair, but managed to catch myself. As I continued my run, I felt its jagged fingers narrowly grasping my pants leg. I made it to the top, and as I turned to see the monstrous creature lunging from the stairs towards me, I slammed the door, hearing, to my satisfaction, it crash down the stairs, breaking and snapping apart. I leaned against the door, slowly sliding down. I sat on the ground, covered in sweat, my necktie askew, my glasses hanging on one ear, the Christmas lights forgottenly wrapped on my arm. Toby turned to look at me, his expression rather calm. Told you someone was in there. And that was Somebody's In There by Psionic Q. I'll tell you what, I hate mannequins. I hate mannequins with a passion because back in like middle school, back in the States, I played a fantastic horror game called Condemned Criminal Origins, which has a notorious level where I think you're in like an abandoned mall or something like that. And basically, you get chased by mannequins, but they don't move when you're looking at them. You know, you look away and they move, kind of stuff. Horrifying. Anyway, so yeah, never liked mannequins ever since. But that's just me. Great story though. Great story. Really enjoyed that. I hope you did too. We'll see you for the next one. Our dog has been barking and scratching up our back door every night. He's been doing this for days, so I sat with him last night to find the issue. I snapped a flash pic at the back door when he barked and captured this. Be very careful outside because this does not look normal. Additionally, whatever it was fled after I photographed it. We haven't seen the animal since then. I live in the Chicagoland suburb, so that's where you should beware of this thing. Nobody can identify it, and my family and I are frankly afraid to go outside now. Look out! Update on this animal. I am having a garage sale, and one of my neighbors came over with his kids. I talked to them about the weird animal, and they have actually seen it too. One of the kids made this drawing depicting the animal. Cut the artist some slack, he's only 6. It isn't a bat or any other mammal. Interesting to note, there is a smaller animal beneath the big one. I don't know if it is representative of offspring or something else, but I don't feel secure with the idea of there being multiple of these. I will try and capture a recording of it. Update. Okay, I took my dog out and we heard the animal. I tried to get a recording of it and capture the creature's voice. It sounds like this. Additionally, in this pic, you can see its eyes in the distance beyond my yard. It was very loud. The clip doesn't do it justice. Update on the animal. I did something really stupid and left the back door completely unlocked for hours. I actually heard something hit the floor downstairs. When I looked, the chicken I bought from the store was missing, but I found the packaging outside through the opened door. The handle just fucking jiggled. Wait. Okay, I zoomed in through the window and flashed it again. It's opening its mouth and turning around behind the woven couch and patio wall. I tried to get a video, but it fled again. Horrible pic, I know, but I had to be fast. It's making its way in front of my kitchen windows. I'm gonna try and sneak a picture. Got one, but it was weirdly easy. The thing just stood completely still with its neck craned up, unblinking. I think as I was studying it, it was doing the same. Like it was fascinated with my light or something. It is a little over 5 feet tall if I had to guess. Something started to scream and yelp in the front yard. I am thoroughly freaked out by the noises, so I'm going up and locking my door. The noises have stopped. I don't want to go outside to see what the commotion was. I should seriously invest in security cameras or a drone. After doing a decent amount of digging, it doesn't seem like there is anything like this animal. My community may have something entirely foreign to deal with here. I do know that it has feathers, is smart, and is nocturnal. But apart from this, I'm in the dark. Any ideas? Still no idea what it is. I do know that it is not afraid of people like most wild animals are. Something weird happened too that made me shut my bedroom window. There's a god-awful smell coming from outside and it wafted into the house. I think it's a skunk. Maybe unrelated though. Update on the animal. So I was looking for tracks of the creature and couldn't seem to find anything. I guess it's light on its feet. But I did find a clump of animal matter. This seems to be some kind of pellet, like the owl pellets I dissected as a kid, but way bigger. About that large pellet, it has some bones in it, including a complete turtle cranium. I'm going to go back out and see if there is more. I have not found any other pellets, but there actually are some tracks in the backyard. I had only checked the front, some very heavy ones and a single cleaner one. Could this just be a deer track? Okay, so I spotted a different animal, but it is just as bizarre as the first. It looks like some kind of little mutant bird. There was more than one of these, and this one here was catching flying bugs. They move quickly and are very skittish. This one has been fighting other birds, ? Over something. Should I go outside and see what it is? I figure it should be safe right now since the patio lights are up and running. Guys, what the fuck? I watched smaller animals tug at the object, and blood just started to pour out of it profusely. It's turned on its side now behind the pot. Also, the patio lights bugged again, and now it's all dark. I had to vomit. Sorry. Give me a few minutes to call the police. Update. There is a child's fucking foot on my patio. I also double-checked the pellet I collected and found this. The foot has been taken away. Not by the cops, who have not yet arrived. I'm going to have to get a hold of animal control or something and warn my neighbors. My neighbors did not answer the door. I don't know why, but their lights are all on. I hope they're okay. I did find this crumpled on the sidewalk, though. It looks like another drawing made by their little boy. I seriously hope he isn't going up and feeding those animals. Something is on the roof. I think whatever was on the roof left because the scratching sounds up there stopped. Something moved in the backyard again, though. It was a long, dark mass. I think it was the large animal from before. I'm kinda horrified right now. Okay, so something made a trail of feathers from the back door that leads to who knows where. I'm not gonna go outside to find out. Twitter had an issue with this file, IG. You can very clearly hear these animals vocalizing outside my kitchen window. They are so loud. It's a variety of noises now. Also, service vehicles are on the move hauling ass everywhere right now. This is a living nightmare. Sorry for the bad typing on this one. So that trail of feathers is just fucking gone now. I hear someone talking outside, but something's not right with their voice. Should I take a look? Whatever was on my roof never fucking left. I'll try to record the voice when I hear it again. This thing on the roof is definitely different from anything else, though. It's spindly. It can go fuck itself. Side note, a super weird bat thing flew onto the sliding screen door. I don't know if it's related to the hell I'm witnessing, but I figured I should share it anyway. By the way, my dog is currently at my grandma's house, so I'm all alone here. Wish me luck. After the goddamn dead kid foot, there's no going back from this. Obviously, I'm not going anywhere right now. The animal is talking to me. I think it's trying to get me to come outside. Yeah, fuck that. Have a listen. Animal update. My heart sank to the fucking floor. There are 100% at least 2 of the larger animals. I just walked away from the kitchen where the first one was talking and turned the corner into my family room and see the second one outside the window motionless. Take a look. I'm not leaving this basement till day breaks. My charger is all the way upstairs. I'm taking a dumbbell. I went up and heard several doorknobs being jiggled in different locations of my house. I'm back downstairs now. My phone is going to die soon. My phone is at 3% right now. I'm in the crawl space right now, hiding behind bins of Christmas decorations. I heard glass shattering upstairs and thuds, which is why I'm tucked away. If I don't make it, you stay safe. This could be it, and I'm so fucking scared. I escaped! I was able to open the window well down here and escape through it. I waited everything out in my car. Not much activity in my house, I think. I could probably go back soon. Cautiously. It's daytime now, so it should be good. I used the car charger to juice up the phone. The police aren't responding to me. Animal update. So my neighbor's screened-in porch is trash, and there is just the weirdest-looking animal thing in there. It saw me, but it isn't doing anything, really. Seems shy. Look at this fucking thing, though. What the hell is happening here? Animal update. Something fucking killed the giant bird thing. I'm both relieved and horrified about this. It's dark outside and the animal screaming is back, but there is a new, very strange noise. It's very deep and drawn out. Sounds nothing like the others. Additionally, whenever I hear it, the crickets stop chirping. Here are the terrifying new sounds I'm hearing outside. Whatever the hell this thing is, it's loud and sounds massive. Also, all of its noises, they have kind of a bass to them. I can feel these noises reverberating through my body. Makes my hair stand up. I'm back in my house. I used all my car's energy with AC and charging, so that was dumb. I boarded the broken window. Something is desperately pawing at my laundry room door from outside. Do I even want to know? There's a fucking deer trying at the door. What the fuck? Also looks to be missing an antler. Poor guy, but what the fuck? Animal update. A normal animal. Here is the buck deer, and it's trying to get into my house. I am genuinely so confused. Is it asking to get targeted? His eyes were so wide, but it got scared of me and ran. I just heard a shit ton of chaos in the bushes and shit right outside the kitchen window, and there's a lot of noise. Something crashed and was just wailing. I don't know what it is exactly, but I know that one of the big bird things is sitting out there as well. Here, listen to this. Someone is talking again, but they actually sound normal. It might be the police? Never fucking mind. It's definitely not normal. I think the same bird-like fucks are trying to get me to come out of my house again. Here is the talking. They seem to be getting a lot better at it.
Don't worry. It's okay. Open. Please help. Somebody. Somebody. God. Oh. Oh, God. Oh, God. It's okay. It's okay. Oh, God, please. Come here. It's okay.
I'm fucking crying now. I fear the worst has happened to my neighbors. Listen to this shit. He is fucking gone. That was his foot.
Daddy. 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 It's okay.
trail of shoes is on my patio. The giant bird thing's left after some rumbling. The deep-voiced thing is back. So many vibrations everywhere. It's definitely closer. My ears are ringing. I'm in the basement now, with a charger and food and water. I don't plan on leaving here. The door in is barricaded. Time to calm down. I just woke up. Something feels off about this house. I'm not alone. I hear footsteps. Holy shit, a lot just happened. There were 3 big bird dinosaur animals in my house, my heart. Okay, I'm alive. I'm a little bruised, but I'm alive. There were three fucking velociraptor looking fucks in my house sniffing me out. I had to escape through the window well again, and those fuckers must have heard me leave. I was running through the forest preserve nearby and had to camp it out with no service. I recorded some things, but not a lot. I was on the way back home for water, and then it showed up. The thing was extraordinarily huge, had to have weighed tons. There wasn't any explanation for why this abomination stood before me in my block, and I didn't need one. I just needed to run and I needed to hide. I made those videos because I thought that it was going to be over. May as well document my last moments, right? My home is barricaded a lot now. Hang on. The crickets stopped. It's back. It moved to the side of my house and beyond. It moved so quietly and gracefully. For something that big, you'd think it'd be noisy. Ah, hell, as I'm writing this out, there is something happening out there. Sounds like a woman crying. It feels wrong, but I'm not going to check on it. The woman sounds like she's screaming now. I'm really afraid it's genuine. She was a real woman, and I did nothing to help her. I've been camping in my room for 3 days straight. Not a lot has happened other than more screaming and bizarre sounds. Things have also gotten in the house downstairs. I heard footsteps several times down there. Something is breathing on my window. This thing is 100% the source of the thunder-like booms and rumbling I have been hearing for a while. It doesn't seem to even notice I'm here. It's just ambling. I don't see or hear any of those fucked up bird-like predators, and the human screaming has stopped for a while. This thing is taller than my house. Examining the image again because the tall animal lumbered away. What the fuck is this? I heard a ton of screaming and chatter outside. I took another pick out my window with a flashlight and see whatever the fuck this is. I don't think they care that I am watching them. These fucking things are very numerous and very dark. I should have mentioned I took a picture of this on a dog walk much earlier, like a week before the first bird thing disturbed my dog at the window. It might have been a part of a police sketch, I think. Since this was from a bit ago, I don't know how long these animals have been around the area for. Who knows what else they've done? It's hard to sleep. There are these weird but sort of pretty cries outside, very loud and frequent. I'll just have to deal with it. I'm gonna make an escape plan tomorrow. My friend was supposed to show up today to drive me out of state. It's been 10 hours. I don't think I'm going anywhere. There are now some extremely weird noises and lights in my backyard and also in the sky. I'm gonna make a run for the basement, but here are some pictures I took of them. These are in separate locations of my yard. What the fuck are these? Some kind of obscure lighting? I can't go in the basement. There is one of those lightning things happening at the bottom. My body is in a lot of pain for some reason, and I feel weak. I try to take a picture of the one at the bottom of the stairs, but it really fucks with the camera and adds fucking strings. I can't get closer to it. I feel like throwing up. And the house smells really weird. It smells like a forest mixed with rotting eggs. I feel horrible. It's gone. It doesn't smell and I don't see any lights anymore. What the fuck? My phone makes a weird noise when I record now. I think it's broken. Here. The first responders are finally fucking here, I think. There are a shit ton of them arriving. It's finally time to get the fuck out of here. I don't know if I should stay or not. There's nobody at my door, and I see nothing. I don't hear anything either, just crickets. What the fuck? Where did those people go? They said they were police, by the way, and gave badge numbers. I'm just too afraid to go look or reach out to them. I'm quietly crying right now. Not to mention the rain. There is a man standing at the door now. He isn't doing anything but waiting quietly. I took this pic after more knocking. I don't know if I should go over to investigate. Still no lights. I ignored the man and he eventually disappeared. But I found something a lot less frightening in my dog's crate. Somehow a smaller bird thing got in the house and is currently rolling around in my dog's bed. It doesn't show any fear towards me, or aggression. Here's an image, again. I don't mind this one very much, but I'm not about to go near it. It still looks fucked up, kinda. Locked up. I'm giving it some cold meat. It seems pretty harmless to me. I'll let it out if it starts to make a racket. I'm honestly happy to have this bird thing in my company. I miss my dog, and everyone else. I let it out, and it's currently sleeping on the couch. I'm going to take it to the basement and try to sleep myself. It will be in a crate, obviously. I'm going to call him Mike. Here. Mikey woke me up. We heard gunshots and screaming outside. There's a lot of it. There are a lot of people, ? Outside? We're kind of afraid right now. He's pacing underneath the pool table and wheezing. I'm wondering where the fuck guns have been in all this. Mikey just flew into the ceiling. Shit. I should have probably accounted for the loose tiles. I can hear him walking around up there. I can hear his footsteps getting further and further away. What the hell is in my basement ceiling? Also, the gunfire has just begun to die down, but there's still lots of distant yelling. There's just a mess of sounds up there. I can record it. I could still hear Mikey wheezing, but it's really faint. I think he's okay, though. All the noises stopped except for super loud and drawn-out creaks, and something dragging across the ceiling? I took another picture and I don't see anything. The power's going in and out. This sucks fuck, because my phone is really low on charge. God damn it. The lights don't work. I'm going to die.
Look at me. Look at me. Who loves you?
Mom.
Okay?
Mom.
You're gonna be okay.
I'm hurting.
Your brother's gonna be okay.
It'll be okay. It's okay. Don't worry. Everything's gonna be okay. Everything's gonna be okay.
These are not people talking. This is in my fucking ceiling. I can hear something breathing and scratching. It sounds stuck. I'm getting a flash picture and running to the crawl space. Currently hiding in the crawl space and holding my breath with my phone at 4%. Here's the image I took before hiding. I'm going to fucking die. This is it. I think it's over. I heard it fall into my workout equipment. It's impersonating a woman and child again and clawing the door. National alert. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, has issued an immediate evacuation notice for all residential locations. Gather emergency supplies and critically important items. All able-bodied citizens are to arm themselves and contact your local authorities for the appropriate assembly point. The military and National Guard are being deployed to further aid regional authorities across the nation. Contacting local authorities is mandatory. Additional details. The current recommendation of dealing with these unknown creatures is being revised hourly. Sheltering inside regular structured homes seems ineffective, giving cause for a nationwide evacuation notice from residential locations where instructed by local authorities. Stay prepared, armed, and fight only if facing a potentially lethal situation. Contact local authorities for further instructions. What? When did you get that? I have been dealing with that shit like that for about a week, I'd say. I think my neighbors are all gone. Where are you currently? Hey. This is the image that was attached next. It's something completely different over there. They are in Michigan, currently. Hey, what the hell is this thing? Is this what's happening? Took this pic in my backyard. I ran out because I heard my cat in distress. Oh shit, you need to get somewhere safe immediately. Be sure you have food on you and water and try finding one of those sanctuaries. Do you have a gun? Hey? I only have a 22. I don't think that'll do any good. It looks bigger than I am. It's gonna have to do. I'm stuck in my basement. I was being trapped in by one of them, but it left me alone. I guess it got distracted. But thank God I am able to reach you now, and have charge back on my device. Okay, what the fuck? Do you need a ride to a shelter? I'm gonna make a run for my car. Wait, have you contacted your local authorities? I tried to contact animal control, but they wouldn't pick up, and the emergency line is busy. The only people I've seen outside are in uniform with a little globe, but I don't recognize it. I don't want to go outside or open the windows if I don't have to. I saw a person with one of those shirts all the way over here. I don't know who they are affiliated with, or why they haven't been ripped to shreds yet. How long should the drive be to get me? Something totaled my car. Shit, man, like 7 hours, I think? I have no idea what traffic will be like right now if other people are headed to the shelters. Okay, I think you should try and just go to the shelter. Quickly. Very quickly. Heading out ASAP. I don't know if it's waiting, but I don't see it anymore. Gonna go for it. Good luck. Thanks, you too, man. This is the last message. I think you should be able to make it, but I'm uncertain. Something did crush my car, though. I could hear the destruction from down here. But I am just happy to be here. Additionally, I think Mikey distracted a large animal that was after me. Update. I'm probably out of Illinois by now. It turns out there are safe ways to travel, like down here. I had to scavenge the probable chargers from stores. A lot of them are pretty much ransacked at this point. I'm running low on food though and will have to go up eventually. I was able to make it to my friend. We had an encounter on the streets whilst driving away and he's gone. So is the car. I didn't take any photos or video of it, but it's left me shaken for quite some time now. I miss him. There's something off about this area. All the pathways keep coming back here. There's something wrong here, and that reptile face wasn't there 2 days ago. I'm really confused nobody else is down here to my knowledge. In case you were wondering, the animals at my house left the scene. I starved myself out long enough to the point I was sure they'd left. I'm going to have to get out of here, though. There are some distant erratic splashing sounds, and I do not trust them. I left the underground earlier today, and I have literally no idea where I am now. This place is unfamiliar to me and feels weirdly humid. Whatever was in the underground tunnels with me also made some haunting noises too. And there was weird howling or something? Have a listen. It was and is pretty far from me. Despite how loud that thing was, I got out of there though, and now I'm here. I heard that distant chuckle sound again from the tunnel and turn on my light. This is what I saw standing deeper inside. No movement, and it looked like it had no eyes. This fucking thing is what's been down hit there the whole time. It was holding something fleshy. I'm far away now. The tunnel is many yards away from me now, but the weird glowing spots are back, and they're literally everywhere. They're freaking out and constantly changing colors now. They turn up green on my camera though. I don't know what these are, but I think they could be wormholes. Those wormholes completely fried my phone's camera, and I lost all service. One of them opened right next to me, and I felt drawn to it, like it was sucking me in. I swear I could see an image of trees inside, but I didn't go. Maybe I should have. Something's been trailing me. I think it might be the same bird-like animal from before, this one from weeks ago, but I'm not sure. It seems larger. I found a cemetery and am able to find shelter in one of the mausoleums. I busted the window to get in. Sorry, dead guy. My battery is limited as I haven't had access to any outlets in a while. I still got a charger though. I've had to eat roadkill a few times and gutter water after rain. I don't think about the taste, just that I need it. The food left in stores has been eaten by people, I think. Hold on. Something is happening outside. I hear people again. They're panicking. I would record, but my phone can't pick up any audio either. They're saying, "Get down, we need to." Something. Not sure, but I'm keeping quiet here. Here with my gross rabbit meat. Oh my god. My entire body started to... something. It's like when your leg falls asleep, but all over my body and 10 times more intense. This happened when the wormhole thing opened next to me. I think they're opening nearby. I'm gonna peek out the window. The voices have moved away. Oh hey, my camera works again, and I'm at full battery. Something must have happened with the wormholes again. I think it fixed my phone? Here's a picture. Awfully foggy today. I heard loud crunching and stuff. It's in this direction, but I can't see anything. It's too damn foggy out, and there's not much movement happening. Weirdly, as soon as I turned this way, the noise stopped. I'm headed back inside now. This is creepy. There was something there, and the crunching sounds I heard. It was the snapping of bone. It had to be. Look, it's got something, probably something human. I threw my food far away so the smell distracts it. Looking at it closer, it's those bird-like fuckers again. They're back. The audio is still bad, but I had to record and run again for documentation. I don't think it saw me, but I can't be sure. I left because there was more than one. I see it. It picked up the rabbit corpse I threw and swallowed it whole. There it is. I need to get out of this area and fast. I was able to evade them thanks to more strange lights. These showed up red instead of green though. I don't know why. The weird birds attacked the lights and it kept them busy long enough for me to leave. Here's an image. Okay, it's night now. I am somewhere in a forest, but the fog isn't letting up. I'm gonna have to camp this one out. I can hear strange wheezing sounds in the trees above it. Sounds like Mikey. Sure enough, Mikey came back. There were others like him making their strange wheezing noises. He has come with food too. I never thought I would say this, but I'm overjoyed to see whatever he is. He's actually sharing. He ripped it in half for me. Not the gift I expected or the amount I need, but I'll take it. He is eating his half, don't worry, I wouldn't steal it from him. He caught it after all. There are some people talking far in the distance too. I don't believe they are, but we will cautiously listen from afar with our lights off. I still have my flashlight, by the way. The voices are getting closer, and there are not many places to hide. Mikey's flock, ? Just took off, but he is still with me. My audio is back up and running, thankfully. Listen to these bastards. They're far away, but they're extremely loud. Mikey and I are paralyzed by it.
Come here. Come here.
Something's approaching. They found us. I ran as fast as possible far, far away. I'm in a barren strip mall hiding in an alley. Before I got here, I heard Mikey screaming and frantically flapping into the trees. He seemed to catch the attention of those monsters more than I did, as they stayed there. I took a flash pic back there and screamed in hopes to scare it. I just looked at the result. It's shockingly clear. Here it is. My demon. I'm going back. I need Mikey with me. Okay, I couldn't find Mikey last night, but I'm still hopeful. I didn't run into any more animals that night. Also, the red lights are becoming more and more common, at least with how my camera detects their color. Here's a pic from earlier today. The light stretched for miles. This night, I have heard some incredibly strange sounds in the forest where Mikey and I were eating. Take a listen to some of them. I think they're correlated with the red lights. No idea what it is. It sounds like talking, but clearly not human, and not saying anything I recognize. I'm just gonna stay away from those sounds the best I can. I found the source, if the deep chattering sounds. It's not as big as it sounds. If I had to guess, it's 7 feet tall. It's not paying any attention to me. It's eating something else on the ground. Looks like it's eating a pumpkin or something. I could try and get a photo. Here it is. I can't even begin to describe it. It doesn't look like anything I've ever seen in my life. It's standing in front of me right now like a deer in the headlights. I'm gonna slowly back up off now. This thing is fucked up. I'm out of the woods entirely. Holy shit. That fucker's face split open slowly and it started to hiss at me. It ran me out of the woods and I could hear more of that bizarre talking or whatever. What the hell even was that freak? I took a picture while it was unfurling its face at me and hissing. Take a look at this fucker. I heard the weird sling beak thing groaning and babbling more off in the distance, but I can't shake the feeling they're observing me from afar. I found a road. Something's wrong with my phone. I feel extremely sick again and vomited. I can't use the camera anymore because this is the result now. Everything hurts. The back of my eyes feels like it's going to explode with fucking needles. I can barely feel my senses. I feel like I'm gonna die. But something's right in front of me. My camera couldn't really capture it, but I tried. I'm fading in and out. This is so much feeling. I woke up cold this morning with a ringing in my head. Suddenly there's snow everywhere and I can't feel my fingers. Walking around the roads are still barren and everything is so much quieter. Someone got brutalized in the road, but I'm sure as hell not going to take a look. It's extremely cold all of a sudden. I could see my own breath. A bunch of the animals died from this snap. Looking around, there's a lot of very prehistoric dead things. Here's some that I have photographed. Oh shit. Mikey better be okay. I need to find him now. I haven't found him, but I did find more bodies. God. I almost feel bad for these guys. They only had the strength to survive for one night. The world may have ended last month, but today, whatever was left of mine is gone. I've been sitting here for the past hour or so with him. I can't believe he's just fucking laying here. It's done. I'm done. He had a fish with him. I'll take it, I guess. Thanks for everything you've done for me. I'll see you soon, friend. I'm getting cold too. Well, I heard a baby crying in the grass. Sure enough, it's no baby. They're back. And this will be the final time we meet. I've decided this dance we've been doing together, it ends today. I'm bleeding heavily now, but I fought with my all and battered that motherfucker. I used a rock to hit its head and my flashlight to disorient it. It didn't kill it, but I sure tried. Here's a picture from that event. I'm in a lot of pain right now. Probably broke something. We fought into the night. A lot of it was just standoffs and chases. Eventually some barking scared it off. I actually saw a pack of stray dogs along with my own dog. They saved me. My dog Archie, he actually came over and said hello to me, but ultimately he left to travel onward with his new group. I missed him so much, but I'm too weak to go anywhere much now. May they rip my neighbor's killer limb from limb. Watching the sunrise, I'm more cold than ever with these torn clothes. My breath backlit by the sunrise is beautiful. Man, I miss my life. Having it cut short at just 32 sucks. I wish I could keep going. My poor family, friends, and neighbors. And Mikey. Poor boy. I'm sorry. Oh jeez, I woke up a second ago to some weird wheezing sounds in the distance. My wounds look fucking terrible in the daylight. And there's my bludgeoning tool. It's not just a weapon, it's a rock. Hell, I don't think I have it in me to walk anymore. Those wheezing sounds are getting closer. Sounds sort of like Mikey, but he's dead. I think it could be his flock headed my way. Mikey isn't here, but his contemporaries are. I guess some of them were able to stave off the cold better than he could. I don't know how much longer we'll all last, though. I can't feel my hands or face. They brought me food to share, it looks like. Sorry, guys, I can't. I'm crying. They're all sitting down next to me. I wish I could tell them how much I appreciate their company, and how much I miss our friend. He's fine, though. I think I'm going to be seeing him soon. Along with the others. My phone is at 3%, and so am I. Goodbye, wild world. And that's the end of the Weird Bird Chicago Guy Twitter thread by Arch. I'm not going to butcher your name, so I'm not even going to try it. This story had so much effort put into it. I mean, the props, what a great touch. Honestly, I was so thrilled to cover this. Thank you so much for this fantastic opportunity. What a great thread. Turns out there's a bit more we can discuss, though. Now that the Weird Bird Chicago Guy's story has concluded, I made a really rough sketch of what I think he looks like towards the end of the story. Please let me know what you envisioned in your mind, if you read the thread, which we did. We've also got... Arch is going to be putting up some stuff on the YouTube. First real video uploaded to YouTube. I'll be chronicling the prop making process and explaining how things are made for the Weird Bird story. I really hope you get something out of this. It was interesting to make, never done anything like this before. Dude, fantastic. So now people can get all the behind the scenes stuff. I'll put the link down in the description as well because it's a bit cut off. It's fine. I got you. Also, as an added bonus, we get an alternate ending. Weird Bird's ending. Lol. Isn't that great? Tragically, a brief snowstorm killed off my lawn dinosaur. Perfect. So perfect. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you for the next one. Oh, and happy birthday, Wymelina. Do you ever feel like you're being watched? That tingle on the back of your neck, the urge to look over your shoulder. I know you have. You're feeling it right now, aren't you? What if I were to tell you that there is a good reason for that feeling, and that you should trust your instincts? They watch. They are always lurking, somewhere in the field of existence that we cannot seem to comprehend, and they are always trying to reach us, to reach me, to reach you. I first notice it on an average day, and in an average setting, with nothing seeming out of the ordinary. I stood in my bathroom before my mirror, looking upon my own reflection. As I hunched forward to wash my hands, flicking my eyes away from the mirror, I felt it. A gnawing sensation that I was being watched. I was looking down at my hands, and yet, at the edge of my vision, I felt that my reflection had not mirrored my movement. Instead, I sensed that it was glaring at me, even as I looked away. Of course, when I glanced up, all I saw was myself staring back. The moment passed, and I thought nothing of it, as anyone would. Then, later that same day, as I sat reading on my couch, I felt it again. That tingle of worry, an urge to look over my shoulder. It was as if I knew the exact location behind me where it was watching me. I looked over my shoulder. Nothing, as expected. 2 silly moments in the same day. Perhaps. Our minds do love to play tricks on us, don't they? And yet, as I sat on the edge of my bed later that same night, I felt it again. It was watching me from the doorway of my bedroom, just outside my field of view. That time I didn't look over my shoulder. I stayed with the sensation. As I recall this experience, you feel it too, don't you? You're feeling it right now. They are watching you. Please, do look over your shoulder. For your own sake. A quick glance, and then back to my story. As I was saying, I stayed with the sensation, sitting still on the edge of my bed. As you'd expect, nothing terribly unsettling came to pass. All I experienced was a subtle increase in tension. The feeling grew stronger. The worry mounted, but nothing else happened. After a minute, I went about preparing for bed, once again dismissing the feeling. I spared a glance at the place where I had sensed its gaze as I milled about, and naturally, I saw nothing. Over the weeks to come, I grew weary of looking over my shoulder and glancing at mirrors and windows, checking to make sure I wasn't being watched with each spontaneous urge. Even if it was only once or twice a day that it would happen, it made me feel foolish nonetheless. So I stopped. More and more I'd let the feeling fester, refusing to look, certain that nothing would come of it. It was through this negligence that they began to draw nearer to me. The sensations grew more intense, and I would feel, at times, that more than one of them were watching. In fact, what was initially a feeling of being watched had begun to evolve into something much more frightening. They were drawing nearer. They wanted me. I could feel their desire. As I speak of this, you too may be experiencing these foreboding feelings in a more raw manner. I believe the reason for this is that when one becomes more aware of them, it gives them greater agency in their hunt. If my theory is correct, then I must apologize for endangering you. Fortunately, however, I also know just how to keep you safe, to keep them distant. But before I proceed, please, do look over your shoulder. Spare a glance at any mirrors or windows or otherwise suspect places in your surroundings. For your own good. I know it may feel silly, but it is necessary. Now then, this is the difficult truth I have ascertained. They are always probing, always searching, and when we feel their gaze, it is no trick of the mind. No, it is their gaze in truth. They watch us, and as they look on, they begin to reach for us. Their gaze intensifies. As the hairs upon our skin stand on end, they draw ever nearer. Yet, when we turn to look at them, we see only the mundane. Our own reflection looks back, uncompromised. A corner that felt suspicious suddenly appears to be empty and devoid of danger. The worry subsides. Distance has once again been achieved. We have severed the connection. Indeed, it is in trusting our instincts that we fend them off. By checking that things are ordinary do we keep things as they ought to be. So, when you feel that you are being watched, please indulge in your urge to look over your shoulder. For monsters and demons only exist if we allow them to. Another fantastic little story by Mo Wanders. This is They Watch. It's almost like a little guide, right? About that strange feeling that you always get, especially late at night or just pretty much in any kind of dark environment where you feel like somebody's watching you, but you can't really prove it. It does happen in daytime as well, but it's more prevalent in a darker environment, when you're less able to kind of sense everything correctly. It's a great way to kind of describe that feeling. Honestly, great little story. Fantastic. Thanks so much, Mo. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I sure as shit did, and we'll see you for the next one. We found a way to listen to the afterlife, and what we heard terrified us. I was working as an audio technician at the time. Mostly freelance, I did odd jobs for films, music artists, and even a few well-known podcasts. When I was approached by a company specializing in R&D, I initially thought they'd made a mistake. Their email was rather mysterious. We're looking for an experienced audio technician for one of our projects. We've listened to your samples, and your sound processing skills in particular seem to be exactly what we're looking for. Your participation will be remunerated up to $3,000 for 3 days of work. If you are interested, please reply within 48 hours. As the nature of this project is highly confidential, no information will be passed on to you about the nature of this project before you sign an NDA. To avoid wasting my time with a hoax, I asked for a face-to-face meeting at their company headquarters. To my surprise, they immediately agreed, and the next day I had an appointment at their premises at 9 a.m. I announced myself at reception, and a woman in a white scientist coat who introduced herself as Elizabeth invited me to accompany her to her office. After signing the NDA in my contract, she led me through a maze of corridors to where I would be working. You'll soon understand why we had you sign a confidentiality agreement. The research we do here is highly confidential, and we've already made a major discovery that just needs one last push, she said, turning to me with a smile. I hope I can help you in the way you expect, I said, still in the dark about the mission I was about to be given. We arrived in a spacious room, already occupied by another man, also wearing a white coat, and whom I assumed to be his superior by the authoritative look in his eyes and his advanced age. Mr. Meltrin, I presume. Darren Dallin, Chief Scientist, delighted to have you with us. Please, sit down. I sat down opposite them on a table that was empty except for a strange object whose origin and function I couldn't account for. Mr. Meltrin, I'm not going to beat about the bush. You're going to be involved in the most important project of your life for the next 3 days. Do you see this device? He asked, pointing to the object in the center of the table. This device is what I've been working on for the last 20 years of my life. You see, I've always been certain that there was life after death, and this device, I'm convinced, is what will enable me to prove it. I inspected the object more closely. At first glance, it didn't look much, about the size of a laptop and just under 12 inches high. It was entirely black, and only a circle like a loudspeaker in the center of the upwardly exposed face was visible. It was connected to a portable keyboard that sat right in front of the scientist. We can't reveal precisely how it works, but to put it simply, this device allows us to listen to frequencies that until now had never been reached. Frequencies that we are certain correspond to the beyond. You'll understand the problem we're facing, Elizabeth said, pressing a key on the keyboard in front of her and looking at a screen I assumed was on the other side of the device. Instantly, a sound from elsewhere pierced my eardrums. The sound was unmistakably high-pitched and seemed static, despite the fact that I had the impression of hearing pitch variations without being able to distinguish them. Elizabeth finally cut the sound with a grimace after pressing a few keys. Mr. Meltrim, we're not asking you to believe us about our discovery. All we're asking is that you work hard to analyze and filter this sound and turn it into something usable. I was circumspect, but they both seemed very serious. You really think there's something in that sound? What do you think it is? A silence fell. Elizabeth looked at her superior out of the corner of her eye without intervening. Yes, Mr. Metron. We think there's something in the sound, as you say. Your work begins today, and Elizabeth will show you the equipment at your disposal. I set to work. I was allowed to use all the equipment in the lab, computers and all, including the device in question. But I couldn't take anything home or work from home. Everything had to be done on site, and every second had to be recorded by cameras and microphones. I recorded a sample of the sound and started by trying to filter it. I'd already worked on sound that was cut, corrupted, of poor quality, or whatever, and I used every technique I knew to try and clean it up. I spent the entirety first day on it, to no avail. The second day I continued in this direction, not knowing what else to do. My attempts became more and more desperate. I honestly couldn't see how they expected me to get anything out of that uniform, shrill sound. I decided to concentrate on my ears and listen to the sound produced by the device over and over again. There was definitely something strange about it. I don't know how to explain it, but the more I listened to it, the more my breathing quickened, as did my heart, and part of my brain screamed at me to end it, or run away. So much so that I was beginning to fear continuing to listen to it. After all, it was supposed to be a sound from beyond, according to them, although I wondered if this scientist hadn't just gone mad trying to find an answer to his obsession. The second day ended like the first. That night, I couldn't sleep. The sound kept echoing in my head. It was as if by listening to it over and over again, it had become imprinted on me. I had the impression of discovering new facets, new variations. It was as if the sound was still happening, but in my head, and I couldn't stop it. I turned over in bed for the 15th time and stared at the ceiling. And the vision that came to me stunned me. At first I thought I was imagining shapes moving because of the darkness. But like the sound, the more I concentrated on what I was seeing, the clearer it became. There were dozens and dozens of faces, their horrified expressions distorting their features as they blended into the ceiling and seemed to be trying to break out, to extricate themselves from the solid matter. As the faces tried to push against the darkness to get out, I could hear the sound in my ears getting louder and louder, sharper and sharper. My heart was beating so fast I was afraid it would suddenly stop. I could hardly breathe. They were there. They were coming out, and for some unknown reason, I was certain that if they reached me, they'd take me with them. With that thought, I jumped out of bed and in 2 steps reached the light switch in my room and looked up. There was nothing there. And the sound, though persistent, was a distant echo in my head. On the 3rd and last day, I sat down on my workstation with dark circles under my eyes. I spent the rest of the night on my feet, trying to think of a solution. I approached the device again, and after a moment's hesitation, my instinct screaming at me not to press the key, I turned it on. Again, that shrill sound, so unique, flat, and endless. That's when it hit me. I remember the first impression I'd had when I heard it for the very first time. A feeling of missing something behind the uniform appearance of the sound. What if there were so many sounds that the mush coming out of them made them impossible to discern? I stood in front of my computer and spent the rest of the day isolating and slowing down the sound to an extreme level. It was 7 p.m., and I was finally ready to do a test. At the same time, Elizabeth entered the room. "The time you were given is almost at 0, she said, with a compassionate smile. "I think I found the solution. Are you ready?" Her eyes widened, and she sat down on a chair next to me in silence. I started the modified recording. I never imagined I'd hear what I heard. Screams. An incredible number of heart-rending cries from an infinite number of people, men and women of all ages. Elizabeth's face turned pale. Her gaze locked with mine, both her hands trembling slightly on her frail legs. The screams continued to fill the room, each passing second seeming to increase the pressure. I stopped the recording. "My superior is going to want to hear this, and apply it directly to the device to get a real-time translation. Can you do that?" She seemed terrified by her own request, but like me, she didn't really have a choice. We had to go through with the project. "Sure, Elizabeth. I should be able to do it in 10 minutes. Just give me a little time to grab something to eat and drink at the cafeteria, and I'll bring something back for you too." Despite the fact that the old chief scientist had heard the modified recording, he still asked me, as Elizabeth had planned, to apply the filter to the live sound. And when the device came on, indeed, we heard again the screams of, what we assumed to be, human beings. And it wasn't the same sounds over and over again. It sounded like it was constantly changing. It was as if the sound itself was alive. The 2 scientists chatted quietly at the other end of the room, and finally came back to me to congratulate me on my work. They both looked satisfied, but I sensed they were still in shock at the implications of all this. I told them that to finish, I just needed a little more time to refine the filtering and write down the method for them to follow once I'd gone. I spent the rest of the night working, and after a while I realized that it was past midnight. I was just finishing tidying up my desk when suddenly the shouting stopped. That's when I realized the device had been on all this time. I couldn't believe it. But I had to believe it, because now it wasn't screams I was hearing, but the slow breathing and exhaling of someone or something. After a while, it said something in a language I didn't know, but which I assumed was something close to Latin. Then nothing. I switched the machine off and on again, once, twice, 10 times. Only a deafening silence and my jerky breathing filled the room. I explained what had happened before leaving. Fortunately for me, as it was all recorded, I had proof that I had nothing to reproach myself for, and they had a clear record of what the voice had said. I spent weeks trying to make sense of the sentence myself, but the more time passed, the more the words escaped me. After a while, I simply got on with my life, but the experience left an indelible mark on me. Even today, in the silence of the night, I sometimes feel as if I can hear a high-pitched tone echoing deep inside me. And I know that if I concentrate just a little bit on it, I'll hear again the horrific screams of that endless human tide. And that was just We Found a Way to Listen to the Afterlife and What We Heard Terrified Us by S.G. Wodehouse. It's not the scariest story. That's quite true. I think it's more like the idea of what it could actually mean. Like the idea of really being able to kind of hear the afterlife, or ghosts and paranormal and stuff. Like imagine if you could actually hear them while you're living in your own home, and all of a sudden you start hearing some things you've never heard before. Yeah, that notion's kind of scary. Or even worse, let's say you go to a place that maybe you didn't know was haunted, but maybe it does have a big history. I feel like I'm really fucking this up now. I'm leaving it in. I'm not taking it out. Either way, the idea of it is scary, but still not the scary story. Still good though. Still a good read. I still enjoyed it, and I hope you did too. We'll see you for the next one. I was sent to the wrong type of jail. I was moved from county jail in October of 2016, following my conviction for armed robbery. I'm not here to garner sympathy, but I want to be clear on a couple things. This was an unfair sentence. Not in the usual innocent man put in jail type of schlock, but in the way that they were clearly pushing me towards being put in a particular jail. I had my blood tested and my hair was sent to a lab. They took pictures of my fingernails. I'd never seen anything like it, but I was basically catatonic. I was in a bad place, wanted it all to just be over. At the time, I didn't think much about the processing. I didn't think about the records that were passed between the guards and doctors, and I didn't care much about the blue rubber stamps that were put at the base of every signed legal document. I didn't know what was normal and what wasn't. I just wanted to get into the haze and no brain the next 6 or so years away. I was put in a cell with Lian Soon, a Chinese-American man. To this day, I don't have the slightest idea what he was in for. Guy looked like your average college kid, but there was just something off about him. He just had this look of complete disassociation, like he was miles away. He never really looked at you. It was as if he looked straight through you. Then again, a lot of inmates get that. I barely managed to talk to him in the first few days. We agreed that I took the top bunk, but that was pretty much all we managed to talk about. We had a straightforward schedule. Breakfast and work up till 11, lunch, more work, some yard time, dinner. After that, we either got to our specialized programming time, religious services, NA, anger management, etc., or an extra hour in the yard. Then back in the cell, lights out by 11. In my first few days, I had to go through a lot of orientation. They were the kind of who's who introductions you might expect, but also just someone pointing to which shelf they stocked the detergent. Basic stuff. I got a job cleaning the beddings. They were so cheap that a firm enough poke would go straight through them like a piece of paper. Washing them was basically putting them in a shredder. We had to go on such a low setting that they rarely ever got clean. I swear I saw a cockroach in one of the pillowcases once, and the damn thing was still alive after the wash and dry. The pillows were also crap. They ripped easily, and feathers would get stuck to everything. Probably wasn't a room in this whole facility without feathers littering the floor. Hell, they were even in the yard. Most of them were, in fact. We'd have rotating schedules, so I rarely got to work with the same people 2 days in a row. I started to recognize a few faces, but people mostly kept to themselves. There was no locker room talk, no braggarts, no bravado, just people hunkering down and shutting up. But even early on, I noticed something was off. I think it all came down to the yard. People stayed away from the prison yard. No one used the exercise equipment. People just stuck to the walls or silently walked by the fences. There were no loud conversations, no sports, nothing. And as soon as that free hour was up, people were pushing to get back in. From day one, I got the impression that the yard was a bad place to be, but no one was telling me why. What kind of prison has dust on the free weights? By the end of the first week, I had started to get into the routine. I was out cold by 10 most nights. Hell, I had the bedding with the least holes in him. Might as well use that luxury. But there was that one night when I just couldn't sleep. I'd lay down and then all of a sudden I'd be wide awake. There was this whistling wind that came down the hall, and it just kept echoing in the back of my head. At first it was a wind, then a whistle, and with no other sound around, it kept growing in my head until it sounded like a goddamn fire truck siren. I pushed my hands against my ears, covered my head in a pillow, but it didn't do a thing. Finally, I just started to mutter to myself, just to fill the air with some other noise. "Please stop," I'd whisper. "Please stop." And the funny thing? It did. It stopped. The next day, I was exhausted. I kept nodding off breakfast, lunch, dinner, pretty much any time I could sit down. The guards would push me awake, and the other inmates just sort of stared at me. Some of them actively avoided me, like there was something wrong with me. When it was time for the yard, the guards took me aside and asked me to help clean the common area. No yard time for me, gotta sweep some feathers. That night, I went to bed as soon as I could. But the moment my head hit that pillow, I was wide awake again. And down through that hall, there was the howling wind. There was no way for me to sleep. The sound just kept growing and all my tiredness was just gone. Whispering didn't work anymore. I had to speak out loud. Around midnight, I was still awake. I was just lying there talking to myself, putting words to the random thoughts to the back of my head to keep my mind occupied. Anything to drown out that awful droning noise outside. I couldn't let it grow further. It was like trying to stop a ship from sinking, one bucket of water at a time. I don't have the slightest idea how Leon tolerated it, but he didn't say a word. Things just got worse. I couldn't sleep that entire night, so when it was time to get up, I could barely stand. I fell asleep brushing my teeth, dropping my toothbrush in the sink. I was so used to talking to myself by then that I blurred out whatever came to mind. I was sleep-deprived, exhausted, and just confused. And people took notice. There was this one guy, Marlin, who was about as new as I was. Short, athletic guy who was just itching for a fight. I accidentally bumped into him in the lunch queue, and he went off on me. Pushed me out of the line, bashed me over the face with a tray, and just started wailing on me. The guards were taking their sweet time, so I just had to take it. But I couldn't. There was just something in me that wanted to hurt this guy. I grabbed his shirt and looked him in the eyes. "You want to get whipped, Greenie?" I said. "You want us to whip you?" I don't know where the words came from. It was just the first thing that came to mind, and the sleep deprivation just forced it out of my mouth like a hiccup. What did you say?" he stammered. "I asked if the little Greenie wanted a whipping." He backed off. His jaw went slack as he just stared at me, unblinking. Just as I'd found words out of nowhere, he'd lost them. His eyes teared up as he backed himself up against the wall. Prison guards came up to restrain us, and I could see all the fight had run out of him. "See you at the orchard, Greenie," I added. "Whip, whip." Marlin broke down. He screamed, tears running out of his eyes. He dropped to the floor and the guards had to carry him out. I thought I'd feel good after that, but the way everyone was staring at me made me feel like a museum exhibit. I had this sickeningly wide smile painted on my face. But it wasn't mine. None of this was me. I was losing control and it scared the hell out of me. I was a puppet. That night, I didn't even bother trying to sleep. I knew that as soon as I'd lay down to try, I'd just be wide awake again. Instead, I tried sleeping on my feet or sitting on the floor. This time, Leon couldn't ignore me. He sat up on his bed, looking at me instead of through me. "You on something?" he asked. "You itching?" "Nah," I said, shaking my head. "Just broken. Something's not right." "You phobic? Trouble with the walls?" "Maybe. I don't know. I can't sleep." "Looks like you sleep all the time, just not in here." "Yeah," I sighed. "Yeah, that's about right." "They stamp you when you got here? You got any stamps?" "Some, yeah, blue ones." "Everyone gets blue ones. What shape?" "Dunno," I shrugged. Leon took a long look at me. In those few dragging seconds, I could hear the wind outside growing louder, and I winced. I groaned to drown out the noise, but it was barely working. I might have to scream to keep it together for another night. "They got 2 stamps," he said. "A hand and a sunflower. You sure you don't know which one you got?" "Which did you get?" I asked. "What do they mean?" "I got the hand," he said. "Most of us did. No idea what it means, but the sunflowers are always a bit..." He pointed at me as to make a point. "Maladaptive." "Private prisons," I chuckled. "Bullshit, all of it." Leon leaned back in his bed and closed his eyes. "Yeah," he sighed. "Sorting us into flowers and hands like a goddamn daycare. Probably got a woodchuck and dolphin stamp too." Liam was out like a light, but as expected, I couldn't sleep. I paced back and forth, screamed into a pillow, and tried massaging my ears. The scratching noise sort of helped, but I still found myself restless. Finally, I got out of bed and pressed my head against the door. Maybe if I let the wind howl, it'll take pity on me. Maybe it would get to a point where it'd either kill me or stop. I didn't care which, as long as something happened. But the strangest thing came to me. As I pressed my head against the door, the sound became clearer. The wind softened to a whistle, and then a gentle hum. The more I tried to lean into it, to listen, the more beautiful it became. Right there, leaning against the door, I had the best sleep in my entire life. The next morning, Lian pulled me up as the guards did their rounds. I'd slept all through the night, and I felt amazing. But even then and there, at my best, I could hear a little piercing sound. That wind, that whisper was still in the back of my mind, even now during daytime. But all I had to do was lean into it, to listen, and a wave of calm would wash over me. It worried me how easy it was. "You got through it?" Lian asked. "I'm getting there." I wasn't paying much attention during breakfast. I was zoned out, listening to what had turned into a melody. Something was speaking to me, but not through words, through emotions and sensation. So it wasn't a word that warned me about Marlin creeping up on me with a sharpened toothbrush. It wasn't the guards or the other inmates. No. It was something in the back of my mind screaming at me to hurt him. So I did. All I heard was laughter. There was this alien joy springing up in my chest, forcing me to my feet. I remember turning around and the world looking different. I felt 4 feet taller. I was looking into Marlin's eyes. But I didn't see him. I saw a teenage kid running through an orchard, hunted by his older brothers who wanted to beat him with a tire iron. Whip, whip! When I came to, I was still laughing. It wasn't my own laugh, and neither was the joy. The howling wind was finally quiet, but I felt like a stranger in my own body. I couldn't feel my limbs, and it took me seconds just to orient myself. To remember my fingers, my feet, my eyes. Marlin was bleeding on the floor from a dozen wounds. Deep bruising, broken bones, possibly brain damage from repeated hits to the side of the head. Involuntary twitching, like a fish out of water, his mouth opening and closing. Like me, he just couldn't find the words. It looked like I'd beaten him with a goddamn tire iron. I was taken back to my cell without a word, paraded through the halls like a prize. I could feel the other inmates staring at me, trying to figure me out. As soon as I looked their way, I saw them recoil. I don't know what the hell they'd seen, but they were looking at me like a goddamn monster. I was locked in my cell for hours. No one was allowed in, and all the while I kept hearing something in the back of my head singing to me, asking me to listen just a little closer. And as soon as I resisted, that noise turned to pain. Within minutes I was pacing the cell, spewing whatever nonsense came flooding through my mind. Nonsense about everything and everyone, just noise. When the guards finally opened the door, I turned to them without skipping a beat. They had their tasers ready. "Deb doesn't know if Eddie is really your son," I rambled. "You think he was premature, but she had that time with Irvin at her job the month before. She thinks about telling you. She thinks that might just be the push you need to finally divorce." A taser to the neck, and I didn't even feel it. As I dropped to the floor in a spasm, my body was screaming with laughter. He had her on the copier. She didn't even think about you. She hoped to see him there again the next week. And there, somewhere deep inside, I found my own thoughts and words, standing by as someone else held the reins. I wanted to tear my ears out, to make it all go away, but I couldn't even move my hands. I'd listened too long and too closely, and now the guards were dragging me by the neck. They took me out to the yard. I heard them talking. They were standing next to me, carrying me, but it still sounded like they were in another room. I could barely make out their voices. "Hatcham mixed up the blood works," they said. "Got the wrong class." "Shit, we got a bloomer? We had a bloomer this whole time? It's a goddamn Christmas miracle he didn't pop his celly. So why are we taking him out? Just making sure. Protocol." "Fuck protocol. Fuck off." They left me in the middle of the yard, lining up in a circle around me. The guard I'd been yelling at stayed inside, weeping over a picture. After a few minutes, I felt a tingle in my hands. It felt like being poured back into my body, like my mind was a liquid. It all came back to me, one thing at a time. Language, memories, senses, choice. Suddenly I was standing up. The wind was clearer out in the open. It was colder than expected, and I wasn't even wearing my shoes. There was a stillness in the air, but there was something menacing to it, like the eye of a storm. "Nothing's happening," I heard. "We take him in?" "Hold on. Look up." From afar, it looked like snow. I didn't even question it. Snow in mid-July? Sure, why not? But it wasn't snow. A white feather touched my nose. I looked up into the clouds, and there, far above, I saw something looking back. I can't explain what I felt at that moment. It felt like I was looking into an eye in the sky, an impossible physical being. But there was nothing there. And yet it spoke through me, like playing a mind game of charades with myself. Pictures flashing in the back of my mind, trying to reach an understanding. Hundreds of memories pounding at the front of my brain every second, like a pitcher being filled up and spilling over the edge. I got a nosebleed trying to keep up. My eyes rolled back, but I still felt like I was looking up. It was easier to see with my eyes closed. My mouth seized up from trying to find 1,000 words at once, instead settling on noises and grunts. There were parts that were crystal clear. It showed me memories I didn't know I had. It showed me my eyes opening for the first time, little hands grabbing my mother's cardigan, her big 80s glasses making her eyes look like a cartoon. It showed me waking up in my crib, reaching for the little toys dancing overhead, and I understood what it meant, that we were born with this instinctual drive to reach beyond our means, to stretch towards the sky, to grab and pull down the unknown to us, making it a part of ourselves. That the most basic instinct of my being was meant to be here to do this, to reach up. "No," I wheezed. All was silent. I looked down as I floated 6 feet off the ground. "No," I groaned. Memories of long-lost dreams came rushing back. Pleasant thoughts you don't want to wake from. Promise of love, lust, joy, and comfort. It was all there, just waiting for me to take it. All I had to do was reach for it, to reach into the sky, and take it. But there was something more, that eye in the sky looking down at me. Not malevolent, not angry, not evil. Just vast beyond comprehension. I was nothing more than a strand of wheat being plucked into the air by a curious farmer. "No! No, no, no!" I screamed. They came running up to me. Guards grabbed my legs, pulling me down. It felt like I was being torn in half, part of me desperately reaching upwards and my conscious self holding me to the ground. All the while, the pleasant silence was turning from a whisper to a scream. "We got it!" a guard yelled as the weather picked up. "Get him out of here! Get him!" Something let go of me. The guard on my left lost his breath as he suddenly went limp. With nothing but a whistle, I saw him whisked into the sky. Not a word of protest. Not a sound. Just a human life growing smaller and disappearing overhead. I dropped to the ground as they scrambled to get inside. Another guard fell flat on his stomach as something invisible grabbed his ankles. Again, a soft whistle, and he was gone. A spot in the dark. "Run! Come on!" The other guards were standing by the entrance, holding the doors open. They were waving at me, desperate for me to just run. But every part of me wanted to stay. To reach up, to touch the sky and go back to that place I was meant to be. To feel my mother's cardigan between my baby's soft fingertips and to look into the night sky with wonder of what could be. It was all there. And yet, my body knew to run. The moment I got inside, I heard thumping. Chunks of meat sprayed across the yard, fragments of bone getting stuck in the barbed wire, fabric torn into shreds. Whatever was up there was happy now, and the howling wind was silent. We all just stood there. I could barely breathe. I'd been so close to surrendering, to give in to it. Whatever was up there had no intention of caring for me. There was no love, no joy, no comfort. All it could promise me was a swift death at best, or the life of a sleepless puppet. But for a moment, we all just stood there. We weren't inmate and prison guards. In that moment, we were just people, trying to understand ourselves. I got processed the next day. They double-checked my blood. Turns out they'd contaminated my result. Sloppy work from the esteemed people at Hatchet Biotechnica. This time I saw them clearly stamp my papers. Blue ink, in the shape of a little sunflower. I was taken out of state. They said it was a matter of security, on account of getting in fights with Marlin. Apparently he'd broken both legs, and his shoulder. Still, I knew better. This wasn't a matter of security. This was about fixing a grave mistake. This prison had a purpose, but I wasn't part of it. Instead, I did my time in a place with no wind, and now I'm out on parole. To this day, I get a shiver up my spine when I hear the whistling wind. I'm scared of my dreams, of my memories. I'm afraid there's still something in me that wants me to go back, to look up. My psychiatrist, Dr. Bogan, tells me I've got an agoraphobic trauma to deal with. She says she has some kind of experimental treatment for it. But I don't know. Overexposure therapy sounds dangerous. But even now, I find myself suddenly waking in the middle of the night, my body talking to itself, telling truths I couldn't possibly know to an empty room. Sometimes not even in my own language. Sometimes in no language at all. Every now and then, a white feather still lands on my shoulder, and I just know that looking up will be the end of me. Or the start. And that was I Was Sent to the Wrong Type of Jail by Saturdead. Man, it's freaky. It's really freaky because it makes you really wonder kind of a little bit more of the details of what was going on exactly, why inmates are stamped in certain ways, what that signifies, what was the eye in the sky. It's interesting, I mean, it definitely feels like there's some kind of a more powerful force, and there's certain people susceptible to it. That much I kind of gathered. Clearly it kills things, but maybe it doesn't kill the ones that it wants? Question mark? I'm not entirely sure. But I really enjoyed the story. I thought it was really good. It was scary in kind of more of a psychological sense, which is still really good in my opinion. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you did too, and we'll see you for whatever's next. Bye bye. Nyarlathotep. Nyarlathotep. The crawling chaos. I am the last. I will tell the audient void. I do not recall distinctly when it began, but it was months ago. The general tension was horrible. To a season of political and social upheaval was added a strange and brooding apprehension of hideous physical danger. A danger widespread and all-embracing. Such a danger as may be imagined only in the most terrible phantasms of the night. I recall that the people went about with pale and worried faces, and whispered warnings and prophecies which no one dared consciously repeat or acknowledge to himself that he had heard. A sense of monstrous guilt was upon the land, and out of the abysses between the stars swept chill currents that made men shiver in dark and lonely places. There was a demonic alteration in the sequence of the seasons. The autumn heat lingered fearsomely, and everyone felt that the world, and perhaps the universe, had passed from the control of known gods or forces to that of gods or forces which were unknown. And it was then that Nyarlathotep came out of Egypt. Who he was, none could tell, but he was of the old native blood and looked like a pharaoh. The Fellahin knelt when they saw him, yet could not say why. He said he had risen up out of the blackness of 27 centuries, and that he had heard messages from places not on this planet. Into the lands of civilization came Nyarlathotep, swarthy, slender, and sinister, always buying strange instruments of glass and metal and combining them into instruments yet stranger. He spoke much of the sciences, of electricity and psychology, and gave exhibitions of power which sent his spectators away speechless, yet which swelled his fame to exceeding magnitude. Men advised one another to see Nyarlathotep, and shuddered, and where Nyarlathotep went, rest vanished, for the small hours were rent with the screams of nightmare. Never before had the screams of nightmare been such a public problem. Now the wise men almost wished they could forbid sleep in the small hours, that the shrieks of cities might less horribly disturb the pale, pitying moon as it glimmered on green water, gliding under bridges and old steeples crumbling against the sickly sky. I remember when Nyarlathotep came to my city, the great, the old, the terrible city of unnumbered crimes. My friend had told me of him, and of the impelling fascination and allurement of his revelations, and I burned with eagerness to explore his uttermost mysteries. My friend said they were horrible and impressive beyond my most fevered imaginings, that what was thrown on a screen in the darkened room prophesied things none but Nyarlathotep dared prophesy, and that in the sputter of his sparks there was taken from men that which had never been taken before, yet which shewed only in the eyes. And I heard it hinted abroad that those who knew Nyarlathotep looked on sights which others saw not. It was in the hot autumn that I went through the night with the restless crowds to see Nyarlathotep, through the stifling night and the endless stairs into the choking room, and shadowed on a screen I saw hooded forms amidst ruins and yellow evil faces peering from behind fallen monuments, and I saw the world battling against blackness, against the waves of destruction from ultimate space, whirling, churning, struggling around the dimming, cooling sun. Then the sparks played amazingly around the heads of the spectators, and hair stood up on end whilst shadow more grotesque than I can tell came out and squatted on the heads. And when I, who was colder and more scientific than the rest, mumbled a trembling protest about imposture and static electricity, Nyarlathotep drove us all out, down the dizzy stairs into the damp, hot, deserted midnight streets. I screamed aloud that I was not afraid, that I never could be afraid, and others screamed with me for solace. We swore to one another that the city was exactly the same, and still alive, and when the electric lights began to fade, we cursed the company over and over again, and laughed at the queer faces we made. I believe we felt something coming down from the greenish moon, so when we began to depend on its light, we drifted into curious involuntary formations and seemed to know our destinations, though we dared not think of them. Once we looked at the pavement and found the blocks loose and displaced by grass, with scarce a line of rusted metal to shew where the tramways had run, and again we saw a tramcar, lone, windowless, dilapidated, and almost on its side. When we gazed around the horizon, we could not find the third tower by the river, and noticed that the silhouette of the second tower was ragged at the top. Then we split up into narrow columns, each of which seemed drawn in a different direction. One disappeared in a narrow alley to the left, leaving only the echo of a shocking moan. Another filed down a weed-choked subway entrance, howling with a laughter that was mad. My own column was sucked toward the open country, and presently felt a chill which was not of the hot autumn. For as we stalked out on the dark moor, we beheld around us the hellish moon-glitter of evil snows. Trackless, inexplicable snows, swept asunder in one direction only, where lay a gulf all the blacker for its glittering walls. The column seemed very thin indeed, as it plodded dreamily into the gulf. I lingered behind, for the black rift, the green-litten snow was frightful, and I thought I had heard the reverberations of a disquieting wail as my companions vanished. But my power to linger was slight. As if beckoned by those who had gone before, I half floated between the titanic snowdrifts, quivering and afraid, into the sightless vortex of the unimaginable. Screamingly sentient, dumbly delirious, only the gods that were can tell. A sickened, sensitive shadow writhing in hands that are not hands, and whirled blindly past ghastly midnights of rotting creation, corpses of dead worlds with sores that were cities, charnel winds that brush the pallid stars and make them flicker low. Beyond the world's vague ghosts of monstrous things, half-seen columns of unsanctified temples that rest on nameless rocks beneath space and reach up to dizzy vacua above the spheres of light and darkness. And through this revolting graveyard of the universe, the muffled, maddening beating of drums and thin, monotonous whine of blasphemous flutes from inconceivable, unlighted chambers beyond time, the detestable pounding and piping whereunto dance slowly, awkwardly, and absurdly the gigantic, tenebrous, ultimate gods, the blind, voiceless, mindless gargoyles whose soul is Nyarlathotep. Everything was pretty swell. There were no prisons, no slums, no insane asylums, no cripples, no poverty, no wars. All diseases were conquered. So was old age. Death, barring accidents, was an adventure for volunteers. The population of the United States was stabilized at 40 million souls. One bright morning in the Chicago lying-in hospital, a man named Edward K. Welling, Jr. waited for his wife to give birth. He was the only man waiting. Not many people were born a day anymore. Welling was 56, a mere stripling in a population whose average age was 129. X-rays had revealed that his wife was going to have triplets. The children would be his first. Young Welling was hunched in his chair, his head in his hand. He was so rumpled, so still and colorless as to be virtually invisible. His camouflage was perfect, since the waiting room had a disorderly and demoralized air too. Chairs and ashtrays had been moved away from the walls. The floor was paved with spattered drop cloths. The room was being redecorated. It was being redecorated as a memorial to a man who had volunteered to die. A sardonic old man, about 200 years old, sat on a stepladder, painting a mural he did not like. Back in the days when people aged visibly, his age would have been guessed at 35 or so. Aging had touched him that much before the cure for aging was found. The mural he was working on depicted a very neat garden. Men and women in white, doctors and nurses, turned the soil, planted seedlings, sprayed bugs, spread fertilizer. Men and women in purple uniforms pulled up weeds, cut down plants that were old and sickly, raked leaves, carried refuse to trash burners. Never, 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 not even in medieval Holland nor old Japan, had a garden been more formal, been better tended. Every plant had all the loam, light, water, air, and nourishment it could use. A hospital orderly came down the corridor, singing under his breath a popular song. "If you don't like my kisses, honey, here's what I will do. I'll go see a girl in purple, kiss this sad world toodaloo. If you don't want my lovin', why should I take up all this space? I'll get off this old planet, let some sweet baby have my place." The orderly looked in at the mural, and the muralist. "Looks so real," he said. "I can practically imagine I'm standing in the middle of it." "What makes you think you're not in it?" said the painter. He gave a satiric smile. It's called The Happy Garden of Life, you know. That's good of Dr. Hitz, said the orderly. He was referring to one of the male figures in white, whose head was a portrait of Dr. Benjamin Hitz, the hospital's chief obstetrician. Hitz was a blindingly handsome man. Lots of faces still to fill in, said the orderly. He meant that the faces of many of the figures in the mural were still blank. All blanks were to be filled with portraits of important people on either the hospital staff or from the Chicago office of the Federal Bureau of Termination. Must be nice to be able to make pictures that look like something, said the orderly. The painter's face curdled with scorn. You think I'm proud of this daub? He said. You think this is my idea of what life really looks like? What's your idea of what life looks like? Said the orderly. The painter gestured at a foul drop cloth. There's a good picture of it, he said. Frame that, and you'll have a picture a damn sight more honest than this one. You're a gloomy old duck, aren't you? Said the orderly. Is that a crime? Said the painter. The orderly shrugged. If you don't like it here, Grandpa, he said, and he finished the thought with the trick telephone number that people who didn't want to live anymore were supposed to call. The 0 in the telephone number he pronounced naught. The number was to be or not to be. It was the telephone number of an institution whose fanciful sobriquets included Automat, Birdland, Cannery, Catbox, Delouser, Easy Go, Goodbye, Mother, Happy Hooligan, Kiss Me Quick, Lucky Pierre, Sheep Dip, Wearing Blender, Weep No More, and Why Worry? To be or not to be was the telephone number of the municipal gas chambers of the Federal Bureau of Termination. The painter thumbed his nose at the orderly. When I decide it's time to go, he said, it won't be at the Sheep Dip. A do-it-yourselfer, eh? Said the orderly. Messy business, Grandpa. Why don't you have a little consideration for the people who have to clean up after you? The painter expressed with an obscenity his lack of concern for the tribulations of his survivors. The world could do with a good deal more mess, if you ask me, he said. The orderly laughed and moved on. Wailing, the waiting father, mumbled something without raising his head, and then he fell silent again. A coarse, formidable woman strode into the waiting room on spike heels. Her shoes, stockings, trenchcoat, bag, and overseas cap were all purple. The purple the painter called the color of grapes on Judgment Day. The medallion on her purple musette bag was the seal of the Service Division of the Federal Bureau of Termination, an eagle perched on a turnstile. The woman had a lot of facial hair, an unmistakable mustache, in fact. A curious thing about gas chamber hostesses was that no matter how lovely and feminine they were when recruited, they all sprouted mustaches within 5 years or so. Is this where I'm supposed to come? She said to the painter. A lot would depend on what your business was, he said. You aren't about to have a baby, are you? They told me I was supposed to pose for some picture, she said. My name's Leora Duncan, she waited. And you dunk people? He said. What? She said. Skip it, he said. That sure is a beautiful picture, she said. Looks just like heaven or something. Or something, said the painter. He took a list of names from his smock pocket. Duncan, 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 he said, scanning the list. Yes, here you are. You're entitled to be immortalized. See any faceless body here you'd like me to stick your head on? We got a few choice ones left. She studied the mural bleakly. Gee, she said. They're all the same to me. I don't know anything about art. A body's a body, eh? He said. Alrighty. As a master of fine art, I recommend this body here. He indicated a faceless figure of a woman who was carrying dried stalks to a trash burner. Well, said Leora Duncan, that's more the disposal people, isn't it? I mean, I'm in service. I don't do any disposing. The painter clapped his hands in mock delight. You say you don't know anything about art, and then you prove in the next breath that you know more about it than I do. Of course, the sheave carrier is wrong for a hostess. A snipper, a pruner, that's more your line. He pointed to a figure in purple who was sawing a dead branch from an apple tree. How about her? He said. You like her at all? Gosh, she said, and she blushed and became humble. That puts me right next to Dr. Hitz. That upsets you? He said. Good gravy, no, she said. It's just such an honor. Ah, you admire him, huh? He said. Who doesn't admire him? She said, worshipping the portrait of Hitz. It was the portrait of a tanned, white-haired, omnipotent Zeus, 240 years old. Who doesn't admire him? She said again. He was responsible for setting up the very first gas chamber in Chicago. Nothing would please me more, said the painter, than to put you next to him for all time, sawing off a limb. That strikes you as appropriate? That is kind of like what I do, she said. She was demure about what she did. What she did was make people uncomfortable while she killed them. And, while Leora Duncan was posing for her portrait, into the waiting room bounded Dr. Hitz himself. He was 7 feet tall, and he boomed with importance, accomplishments, and the joy of living. Well, Miss Duncan, he said, and he made a joke. "What are you doing here?" he said. "This isn't where the people leave, this is where they come in." "We're going to be in the same picture together," she said shyly. "Good," said Dr. Hitz heartily. "And say, isn't that some picture?" "I sure am honored to be in it with you," she said. "Let me tell you," he said, "I'm honored to be in it with you. Without women like you, this wonderful world we've got wouldn't be possible." He saluted her and moved toward the door that led to the delivery rooms. "Guess what was just born?" he said. "I can't," she said. "Triplets," he said. "Triplets," she said. She was exclaiming over the legal implications of triplets. The law said that no newborn child could survive unless the parents of the child could find someone who would volunteer to die. Triplets, if they were all to live, called for 3 volunteers. "Do the parents have 3 volunteers?" said Leora Duncan. "Last I heard," said Dr. Hitz, "they had 1, and were trying to scrape another 2 up." "I don't think they made it," she said. "Nobody made 3 appointments with us. Nothing but singles going through today, unless somebody called in after I left. What's the name?" "Welling," said the waiting father, sitting up, red-eyed and frowsy. "Edward K. Welling, Jr. is the name of the happy father-to-be." He raised his right hand, looked at a spot on the wall, gave a hoarsely wretched chuckle. "Present," he said. "Oh, Mr. Welling," said Dr. Hitz, "I didn't see you." "The Invisible Man," said Welling. "They just phoned me that your triplets have been born," said Dr. Hitz. "They're all fine, and so is the mother. I'm on my way in to see them now." "Hooray," said Welling emptily. "You don't sound very happy," said Dr. Hitz. "What man in my shoes wouldn't be happy?" said Welling. He gestured with his hands to symbolize carefree simplicity. "All I have to do is pick out which one of the triplets is going to live, then deliver my maternal grandfather to the happy hooligan and come back here with a receipt." Dr. Hitz became rather severe with Welling, towered over him. "You don't believe in population control, Mr. Welling?" he said. "I think it's perfectly keen," said Welling tautly. "Would you like to go back to the good old days when the population of the Earth was 20 billion, about to become 40 billion, then 80 billion, then 160 billion? Do you know what a druplet is, Mr. Welling?" said Hitz. "Nope," said Welling sulkily. "A druplet, Mr. Welling, is one of the little knobs, one of the little pulpy grains of a blackberry," said Dr. Hitz. "Without population control, human beings would now be packed on the surface of this old planet like drupelets on a blackberry. Think of it." Welling continued to stare at the same spot on the wall. "In the year 2000, said Dr. Hitz, "before scientists stepped in and laid down the law, there wasn't even enough drinking water to go around, and nothing to eat but seaweed. And still people insisted on their right to reproduce like jackrabbits, and their right is possible to live forever." "I want those kids," said Welling quietly. "I want all 3 of them." "Of course you do," said Dr. Hitz. "That's only human." "I don't want my grandfather to die either," said Welling. "Nobody's really happy about taking a close relative to the cat box," said Dr. Hitz gently, sympathetically. "I wish people wouldn't call it that," said Leora Duncan. "What?" said Dr. Hitz. "I wish people wouldn't call it the cat box and things like that," she said. "It gives people the wrong impression." "You're absolutely right," said Dr. Hitz. "Forgive me." He corrected himself, gave the municipal gas chambers their official title, a title no one ever used in conversation. "I should have said Ethical Suicide Studios," he said. "That sounds so much better," said Leora Duncan. "This child of yours, whichever one you decide to keep, Mr. Welling," said Dr. Hitz, "he or she is going to live on a happy, roomy, clean, rich planet, thanks to population control. In a garden like that mural there." He shook his head. 2 centuries ago, when I was a young man, it was a hell that nobody thought could last another 20 years. Now centuries of peace and plenty stretch before us as far as the imagination cares to travel." He smiled luminously. The smile faded as he saw that Welling had just drawn a revolver. Welling shot Dr. Hitz dead. "There's room for 1. A great big one," he said. And then he shot Leora Duncan. "It's only death," he said to her as she fell. "There! Room for 2. And then he shot himself, making room for all 3 of his children. Nobody came running. Nobody, seemingly, heard the shots. The painter sat on the top of his stepladder, looking down reflectively on the sorry scene. The painter pondered the mournful puzzle of life demanding to be born, and, once born, demanding to be fruitful, to multiply and to live as long as possible. To do all that in a very small planet that would have to last forever. All the answers that the painter could think of were grim. Even grimmer, surely, than a cat box, a happy hooligan, an easy go. He thought of war, he thought of plague, he thought of starvation. He knew that he would never paint again. He let his paintbrush fall to the drop cloths below. And then he decided he had had about enough of life in the happy garden of life too, and he came slowly down from the ladder. He took Welling's pistol, really intending to shoot himself. But he didn't have the nerve. and then he saw the telephone booth in the corner of the room. He went to it, dialed the well-remembered number, 2B or not 2B. Federal Bureau of Termination, said the very warm voice of a hostess. How soon could I get an appointment? He asked, speaking very carefully. We could probably fit you in late this afternoon, sir, she said. Might even be earlier if we get a cancellation. All right, said the painter. Fit me in if you please. And he gave her his name, spelling it out. Thank you, sir, said the hostess. Your city thanks you, your country thanks you, your planet thanks you, but the deepest thanks of all is from future generations. Aepyornis Island by H.G. Wells. The man with the scarred face leant over the table and looked at my bundle. Orchids? He asked. A few, I said. Cypripediums? He said. Chiefly, said I. Anything new? I thought not. I did these islands 27 years ago. If you find anything new here, well, it's brand new. I didn't leave much. I'm not a collector, said I. I was young then, he went on. Lord, how I used to fly around. He seemed to take my measure. I was in the East Indies 2 years ago, and in Brazil 7. Then I went to Madagascar. I know a few explorers by name, I said, anticipating a yarn. Whom did you collect for? Dawson's. I wonder if you've heard the name of Butcher ever? Butcher. Butcher? The name seemed vaguely present in my memory. Then I recalled Butcher versus Dawson. Why, said I, you were the man who sued them for 4 years' salary, got cast away on a desert island. Your servant, said the man with the scar, bowing. Funny case, wasn't it? Here was me, making a little fortune on that island, doing nothing for it neither, and them quite unable to give me notice. It often used to amuse me thinking over it while I was there. I did calculations of it. Big. All over the blessed atoll in ornamental figuring. How did it happen? Said I. I don't rightly remember the case. Well, you've heard of the Aepyornis? Rather. Andrews was telling me of a new species he was working on only a month or so ago, just before I sailed. They've got a thigh bone, it seems, nearly a yard long. Monster the thing must have been. I believe you, said the man with the scar. It was a monster. Sinbad's rock was just a legend of him. But when did they find these bones? 3 or 4 years ago. 91, I fancy? Why? Why? Because I found them. Lord. It's nearly 20 years ago. If Dawson's hadn't been silly about that salary, they might have made a perfect ring in him. I couldn't help the infernal boat going adrift. He paused. I suppose it's the same place. A kind of swamp about 90 miles north of Antananarivo. Do you happen to know? You have to go to it along the coast by boats. You don't happen to remember, perhaps? I don't. I fancy Andrews said something about a swamp. It must be the same. It's on the east coast, and somehow there's something in the water that keeps things from decaying. Like creosote it smells. It reminded me of Trinidad. Did they get any more eggs? Some of the eggs I found were 1.5 feet long. The swamp goes circling round, you know, and cuts off this bit. It's mostly salt, too. Well, what a time I had of it. I found the things quite by accident. We went for eggs, me and 2 native chaps, in one of those rum canoes all tied together, and found the bones at the same time. We had a tent and provisions for 4 days, and we pitched on one of the firmer places. To think of it brings that old terry smell back even now. It's funny work. You go probing into the mud with iron rods, you know. Usually the egg gets smashed. I wonder how long it is since these Aepyornises really lived. The missionaries say the natives have legends about when they were alive, but I never heard any such stories myself. But certainly those eggs we got were as fresh as if they had been new laid. Fresh! Carrying them down to the boat, one of my chaps dropped one on a rock and it smashed. How I lammed into the beggar. But sweet it was, as if it was new laid, not even smelly. And his mother dead these 400 years, perhaps. Said a centipede had bit him. However, I'm getting off the straight with the story. It had taken us all day to dig into the slush and get these eggs out unbroken, and we were all covered with beastly black mud, and naturally I was cross. So far as I knew, they were the only eggs that have ever been got out, not even cracked. I went afterwards to see the ones they have at the Natural History Museum in London. All of them were cracked and just stuck together like a mosaic and bits missing. Mine were perfect, and I meant to blow them when I got back. Naturally, I was annoyed at the silly duffer dropping 3 hours' work just on account of a centipede. I hit him about, rather. The man with the scar took out a clay pipe. I placed my pouch before him. He filled up absent-mindedly. How about the others? Did you get those home? I don't remember. That's the queer part of the story. I had 3 others. Perfectly fresh eggs. Well, we put them in the boat, and then I went up to the tent to make some coffee, leaving my 2 heathens down by the beach, the one fooling about with his sting and the other helping him. It never occurred to me that the beggars would take advantage of the peculiar position I was in to pick a quarrel. But I suppose the centipede poison and the kicking I'd given him had upset the one. He was always a cantankerous sort, and he persuaded the other. I remember I was sitting and smoking and boiling up the water over a spirit lamp, business I used to take on these expeditions. Incidentally, I was admiring the swamp under the sunset. All black and blood-red it was, in streaks, a beautiful sight. And up beyond the land rose grey and hazy to the hills, and the sky behind them red, like a furnace mouth. And 50 yards behind the back of me was these blessed heathens, quite regardless of the tranquil air of things, plotting to cut off with the boat and leave me all alone with 3 days' provisions and a canvas tent, and nothing to drink whatsoever beyond a little keg of water. I heard a kind of yelp behind me, and there they were in this canoe affair. It wasn't properly a boat, and perhaps 20 yards from land. I realized what was up in a moment. My gun was in the tent, and besides, I had no bullets, only duck shot. They knew that. But I had a little revolver in my pocket, and I pulled it out as I ran down to the beach. "Come back," says I, flourishing it. They jabbered something at me, and the man that broke the egg jeered. I aimed at the other because he was unwounded and had the paddle, and I missed. They laughed. However, I wasn't beat. I knew I had to keep cool, and I tried him again and made him jump with the wang of it. He didn't laugh that time. The 3rd time I got his head, and over he went, and the paddle with him. It was a precious lucky shot for a revolver. I reckon it was 50 yards. He went right under. I don't know if he was shot or simply stunned and drowned. Then I began to shout to the other chap to come back, but he huddled up in the canoe and refused to answer. So I fired out my revolver at him and never got near him. I felt a precious fool, I can tell you. There I was on this rotten black beach, flat swamp all behind me, and the flat sea, cold after the sunset, and just this black canoe drifting steadily out to sea. I tell you, I damned Dawson's and Jamracks and museums and all the rest of it just to rights. I bawled to this to come back, until my voice went up into a scream. There was nothing for it but to swim after him and take my luck with the sharks. So I opened my clasp knife and put it in my mouth and took off my clothes and waded in. As soon as I was in the water, I lost sight of the canoe, but I aimed, as I judged, to head it off. I hoped the man in it was too bad to navigate it, and that it would keep on drifting in the same direction. Presently it came up over the horizon again to the southwestward, about. The afterglow of sunset was well over now, and the dim of night creeping up. The stars were coming through the blue. I swam like a champion, though my legs and arms were soon aching. However, I came up to him by the time the stars were fairly out. As it got darker, it began to see all manner of glowing things in the water. Phosphorescence, you know. At times it made me giddy. I hardly knew which was stars and which was phosphorescence, and whether I was swimming on my head or my heels. The canoe was as black as sin, and the ripple under the bows like liquid fire. I was naturally chary of chambering up into it. I was anxious to see what he was up to first. He seemed to be lying, cuddled up in a lump in the bows, and the stern was all out of water. The thing kept turning round slowly as it drifted, kinda waltzing, don't you know. I went to the stern and pulled it down, expecting him to wake up. Then I began to clamber in with my knife in my hand, and ready for a rush, but he never stirred. So there I sat in the stern of the little canoe, drifting away over the calm phosphorescent sea, and with all the host of the stars above me, waiting for something to happen. After a long time I called him by name, but he never answered. I was too tired to take any risks by going along to him, so we sat there. I fancy I dozed once or twice. When the dawn came, I saw he was as dead as a doornail, and all puffed up and purple. My 3 eggs and the bones were lying in the middle of the canoe, and the keg of water and some coffee and biscuits wrapped in a Cape Argus by his feet, and a tin of methylated spirit underneath him. There was no paddle, nor in fact anything except the spirit tin that I could use as one. so I settled to drift until I was picked up. I held an inquest on him, brought in a verdict against some snake, scorpion, or centipede unknown, and sent him overboard. After that, I had a drink of water and a few biscuits and took a look around. I suppose a man low down as I was don't see very far, leastways. Madagascar was clean out of sight, and any trace of land at all. I saw a sail going southwestward. Looked like a schooner, but her hull never came up. Presently the sun got high in the sky and began to beat down upon me. Lord, it pretty near made my brains boil. I tried dipping my head in the sea, but after a while my eye fell on the Cape Argus, and I lay down flat in the canoe and spread this over me. I drifted 10 days, said the man with the scar. It's a little thing in the telling, isn't it? Every day was like the last. Except in the morning and the evening, I never kept a lookout, even. The blaze was so infernal. I didn't see a sail after the first 3 days, and those I saw took no notice of me. About the 6th night, a ship went by scarcely half a mile away from me, with all its lights ablaze and its ports open, looking like a big firefly. There was music aboard. I stood up and shouted and screamed at it. The second day, I broached one of the Aepyornis eggs, scraped the shell away at the end bit by bit, and tried it, and I was glad to find it was good enough to eat. A bit flavory, not bad, but with something of a taste of a duck's egg. There was a kind of circular patch, about 6 inches across, on one side of the yolk, and with streaks of blood and a white mark like a ladder in it, and I thought queer. But I did not understand what this meant at the time, and I wasn't inclined to be particular. The egg lasted me 3 days, with biscuits and a drink of water. I chewed coffee berries too, invigorating stuff. The second egg I opened about the 8th day, and it scared me. The man with the scar paused. Yes, he said. It's developing. I dare say you find it hard to believe. I did, with the thing before me. There the egg had been, sunk in that cold black mud, perhaps 300 years. But there was no mistaking it. There was the... embryo, with its big head and curved back, and its heart beating under its throat, and the yolk shriveled up and great membranes spreading inside of the shell and all over the yolk. Here was I hatching out the eggs of the biggest of all extinct birds, in a little canoe in the midst of the Indian Ocean. If old Dawson had known that, it was worth 4 years' salary. What do you think? However, I had to eat that precious thing up, every bit of it. Before I sighted the reef, and some of the mouthfuls were beastly unpleasant. I left the third one alone. I held it up to the light, but the shell was too thick for me to get any notion of what might be happening inside. And though I fancied I heard blood pulsing, it might have been the rustle of my own ears, like what you listen to in a seashell. Then came the atoll. Came out of the sunrise, as it were, suddenly close up to me. I drifted straight towards it until I was about half a mile from shore, not more, and then the current took a turn, and I had to paddle as hard as I could with my hands and bits of the Aepyornis shell to make the place. However, I got there. It was just a common atoll about 4 miles round, with a few trees growing around and a spring in one place and the lagoon full of parrotfish. I took the egg ashore and put it in a good place, well above the tide lines and in the sun, to give it all the chance I could, and pulled the canoe up safe and loafed about prospecting. It's rum how dull an atoll is. As soon as I had found a spring, all the interest seemed to vanish. When I was a kid, I thought nothing could be finer or more adventurous than the Robinson Crusoe business, but that place was as monotonous as a book of sermons. I went round finding eatable things and generally thinking, but I tell you I was bored to death before the first day was out. It shows my luck. The very day I landed, the weather changed. A thunderstorm went by to the north and flicked its wing over the island, and in the night there came a drencher and a howling wind slap over us. It wouldn't have taken much, to upset that canoe. I was sleeping under the canoe, and the egg was luckily among the sand higher up beach, and the first thing I remember was a sound like 100 pebbles hitting the boat at once, and a rush of water over my body. I'd been dreaming of Antananarivo, and I sat up and hallooed to Intoshi to ask her what the devil was up, and clawed out of the chair where the matches used to be. Then I remembered where I was. There were phosphorescent waves rolling up as if they meant to eat me, and all the rest of the night as black as pitch. The air was simply yelling. The clouds seemed down on your head almost, and the rain fell as if heaven was sinking, and they were bailing out the waters above the firmament. One great roller came writhing at me, like a fiery serpent, and I bolted. Then I thought of the canoe, and ran down to it as the water went hissing back again. But the thing had gone. I wandered about the egg then, and felt my way to it. It was all right and well out of reach of the maddest waves, so I sat down beside it and cuddled it for company. Lord, what a night that was. The storm was over before the morning. There wasn't a rag of cloud left in the sky when the dawn came, and all along the beach there were bits of plank scattered, which was the disarticulated skeleton, so to speak, of my canoe. However, that gave me something to do, for taking advantage of two of the trees being together, I rigged up a kind of storm shelter with these vestiges, and that day, the egg hatched. Hatched, sir, when my head was pillowed on it and I was asleep. I heard a whack and felt a jar and sat up, and there was the end of the egg pecked out and a rum little brown head looking out at me. Lord, I said, you're welcome. And with little difficulty he came out. He was a nice friendly little chap at first, about the size of a small hen, very much like most other young birds, only bigger. His plumage was a dirty brown to begin with a sort of grey scab that fell off it very soon, and scarcely feathers, a kind of downy hair. I can hardly express how pleased I was to see him. I tell you, Robinson Crusoe doesn't make near enough of his loneliness. But here was interesting company. He looked at me and winked his eye from the front backwards, like a hen, and gave a chirp and began to peck about at once, as though being hatched 300 years too late was just nothing. Glad to see you, Man Friday, says I. For I had naturally settled he was to be called Man Friday, if ever he was hatched. As soon as ever. I found the egg in the canoe had developed. I was a bit anxious about his feed, so I gave him a lump of raw parrotfish at once. He took it and opened his beak for more. I was glad of that, for, under the circumstances, if he'd been at all fanciful, I should have had to eat him after all. You'd be surprised what an interesting bird that Aepyornis chick was. He followed me about from the very beginning. He used to stand by me and watch while I fished in the lagoon, and go shares in anything I caught. And he was sensible, too. There were nasty green warty things, little like pickled gherkins. He used to lie about on the beach, and he'd try one of these and it upset him. He never even looked at any of them again. And he grew. You could almost see him grow. And as I was never much of a society man, his quiet, friendly ways suited to me to a T. For nearly 2 years, we were as happy as we could be on that island. I had no business worries, for I knew my salary was mounting up at Dawson's. We would see a sail now and then, but nothing ever came near us. I amused myself, too, by decorating the island with designs worked in sea urchins and fancy shells of various kinds. I put Aepyornis Island all around the place, very nearly, in big letters, like what you see done with coloured stones at railway stations in the old country, and mathematical calculations and drawings of various sorts. And I used to lie watching the blessed bird stalking round and growing, and think how I could make a living out of him by showing him about if I ever got taken off. After his first molt, he began to get handsome, with a crest and a blue wattle, and a lot of green feathers at the behind of him. And then I used to puzzle whether Dawson's had any right to claim him or not. Stormy weather, and in the rainy season, we lay snug under the shelter. I had made out of the old canoe, and I used to tell him lies about my friends at home. And after a storm, we would go round the island together to see if there was any drift. It was a kind of idyll, you might say. If only I had some tobacco, it would have been simply just like heaven. It was about the end of the second year our little paradise went wrong. Friday was then about 14 feet high to the bill of him, with a big broad head like the end of a pickaxe, and 2 huge brown eyes with yellow rims, set together like a man's, not out of sight of each other like a hen's. His plumage was fine, none of the half-mourning style of your ostrich, more like a cassowary as far as colour and texture go. And then it was he began to cock his comb at me, and give himself airs, and show signs of a nasty temper. At last came a time when my fishing had been rather unlucky, and he began to hang about me in a queer, meditative way. I thought he might have been eating sea cucumbers or something, but it was really just discontent on his part. I was hungry too, and when at last I landed a fish, I wanted it for myself. Tempers were short that morning on both sides. He pecked at it and grabbed it, and I gave him a whack on the head to make him leave go. And at that, he went for me. Lord. He gave me this in the face. The man indicated his scar. Then he kicked me. It was like a cart horse. I got up, and seeing he hadn't finished, I started off full tilt with my arms doubled up over my face. But he ran on those gawky legs of his faster than a racehorse, and kept landing out at me with sledgehammer kicks, and bringing his pickaxe down on the back of my head. I made for the lagoon and went up into my neck. He stopped at the water, for he hated getting his feet wet, and began to make a shindy, something like a peacock's, only hoarser. He started strutting up and down the beach. I'll admit I felt small to see these blessed fossil lording it there. and my head and my face were all bleeding, and, well, my body just one jelly of bruises. I decided to swim across the lagoon and leave him alone for a bit, until the affair blew over. I shinned up the tallest palm tree and sat there thinking of it all. I don't suppose I ever felt so hurt by anything before or since. It was the brutal ingratitude of the creature. I'd been more than a brother to him. I'd hatched him, educated him, a great gawky out-of-date bird. And me a human being, heir of the ages and all that. I thought after a time he'd begin to see things in that light himself, and feel a little sorry for his behavior. I thought if I was to catch some nice little bits of fish, perhaps, and go to him presently in a casual kind of way, and offer them to him, he might do the sensible thing. It took me some time to learn how unforgiving and cantankerous an extinct bird can be. Malice. I won't tell you all the little devices I tried to get that bird round again. I simply can't. It makes my cheek burn with shame even now to think of the snubs and buffets I had from this infernal curiosity. I tried violence. I chucked lumps of coral at him from a safe distance, but he only swallowed them. I shied my open knife at him and almost lost it, though it was too big for him to swallow. I tried starving him out and struck fishing, but he took to picking along the beach at low water after worms, and rubbed along on that. Half my time I spent up to my neck in the lagoon, and the rest up the palm trees. One of them was scarcely high enough, and when he caught me up it, he had a regular bank holiday with the calves of my legs. It got unbearable. I don't know if you've ever tried sleeping up a palm tree. It gave me the most horrible nightmares. Think of the shame of it, too. Here was this extinct animal mooning about my island like a sulky duke, and me not allowed to rest the sole of my foot on the place. I used to cry with weariness and vexation. I told him straight that I didn't mean to be chased about a desert island by any damned anachronisms. I told him to go and peck a navigator of his own age. But he only snapped his beak at me. Great ugly bird, all legs and neck. I shouldn't like to say how long that went on altogether. I'd have killed him sooner if I'd known how. However, I hit on a way of settling him at last. It is a South American dodge. I joined all my fishing lines together with stems of seaweed and things and made a stoutish string, perhaps 12 yards in length or more, and I fastened 2 lumps of coral rock to the ends of this. It took me some time to do, because every now and then I had to go into the lagoon or up a tree as the fancy took me. This I whirled rapidly round my head, and then let it go at him. The first time I missed, but the next time the string caught his legs beautifully, and wrapped round them again and again. Over he went. I threw it standing waist deep in the lagoon, and as soon as he went down, I was out of the water and sawing at his neck with my knife. I don't like to think of that even now. I felt like a murderer while I did it, though my anger was hot against him. When I stood over him and saw him bleeding on the white sand and his beautiful great legs and neck writhing in his last agony. With that tragedy, loneliness came upon me like a curse. Good Lord! You can't imagine how I missed that bird. I sat by his corpse and sorrowed over him, and shivered as I looked round the desolate, silent reef. I thought of what a jolly little bird he had been when he was hatched, and of 1,000 pleasant tricks he had played before he went wrong. I thought if I'd only wounded him, I might have nursed him round into a better understanding. If I'd had any means of digging into the coral rock, I'd have buried him. I felt exactly as if he was human. As it was, I couldn't think of eating him, so I put him in the lagoon, and the little fishes picked him clean. I didn't even save the feathers. Then one day a chap cruising about in a yacht had a fancy to see if my atoll still existed. He didn't come a moment too soon, for I was about sick enough of the desolation of it, and only hesitating whether I should walk out into the sea and finish up the business that way, or fall back on the green things. I sold the bones to a man named Winslow, a dealer near the British Museum, and he says he sold them to old Havers. It seems Havers didn't understand they were extra large, and it was only after his death they attracted attention. They called him Aepyornis. What was it? Aepyornis vastus, said I. It's funny, the very thing was mentioned to me by a friend of mine. When they found an Aepyornis with a thigh a yard long, they thought they had reached the top of the scale, and called him Aepyornis maximus. Then someone turned up another thigh bone 4 feet 6 or more, and that they called Aepyornis titan. Then your vastus was found after old Havers died in his collection, and then a vastissimus turned up. Winslow was telling me as much, said the man with the scar. If they get any more Aepyornises, he reckons some scientific swell will go and burst a blood vessel. But it was a queer thing to happen to a man, wasn't it altogether? Every night, I can hear a little girl crying in the attic of my new home. When I investigated the noise, the truth of its origins was much darker than I thought. Life had been throwing curveballs at me lately. A messy breakup with Sasha, a strained relationship with my folks, and financial struggles that made affording rent an impossible feat. That's when I stumbled upon a glimmer of hope on a shady website called Dark Realty Homes. A creepy name for a real estate platform, but the rent for the old, seemingly abandoned house was only $100 a month. Desperate times call for desperate measures, and I couldn't resist the allure of affordability. Upon moving in, my gut instincts kicked in, warning me that this place wasn't just old, but had a strange aura about it. The walls creaked, the floorboards groaned, and the air was perpetually musty. I'd complained to the landlord, Michael, about the creaks and the eerie ambiance, but he was dismissive, telling me to be grateful for such a cheap deal. It was like he reveled in my discomfort, a grin hidden behind his curt responses. One evening, as I lay on the creaky bed trying to make sense of my life, I heard it. A faint crying, like that of a little girl. Chills ran down my spine. It wasn't a sound that belonged in an old, abandoned house. Against my better judgment, I decided to investigate. The attic entrance was a rickety hatch in the ceiling. As I opened it, the crying abruptly ceased. It was as if the unseen entity knew I had breached its space. Armed with a flashlight, I cautiously ascended into the dark abyss. The attic was a chaotic labyrinth of abandoned furniture covered in dusty sheets. My flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows across the forgotten relics. I searched every nook and cranny, hoping to catch a glimpse of something paranormal. The oppressive darkness and an unshakable feeling of being watched pushed me to retreat hastily. The next night, after a grueling day at work, the crying returned, louder and more persistent. I tried drowning it out with music through my AirPods, but the sobbing cut through, growing in intensity. I couldn't ignore it any longer. Frustrated and exhausted, I called Michael to complain. But, late into the night, my calls went unanswered. Michael, the ever-dismissive landlord, chose to ignore my pleas for help. Left with no alternative, I was torn between investigating the attic again or accepting the eerie fate that awaited me. In the dimly lit room, surrounded by the oppressive silence, I contemplated my next move. The unsettling feeling of being watched and the haunting cries lingered in the air. As the weight of uncertainty pressed down on me, I wondered if I should confront the mysterious presence in the attic or continue my uneasy coexistence with the unknown. The decision loomed over me, casting a shadow on my newfound sanctuary, a cheap house with a high price. The following night, I found myself standing before the attic entrance once more, wrestling with the decision to confront the inexplicable cries or resign to a sleepless existence. The air felt charged with anticipation as I hesitantly pushed open the hatch. As the entrance creaked open, the crying ceased yet again. It was as if the attic harbored secrets that only unveiled themselves in the shadows. Armed with determination and my feeble flashlight, I stepped into the darkness. The attic seemed even more foreboding than before. Abandoned trinkets and forgotten memories lay scattered across the dusty floor. The air was thick, suffused with an otherworldly energy that sent shivers down my spine. As I cautiously advanced, the sobbing resumed, echoing through the desolate space. "Hello?" I called out, my voice wavering. The crying persisted, seeming to surround me, bouncing off the decaying walls. I couldn't pinpoint its source. In my quest for answers, I stumbled upon an old, weathered trunk, tucked away in a corner. My curiosity took hold, and I cautiously opened it. Inside, I discovered a collection of worn-out children's toys and faded photographs. Faces of a family long forgotten stared back at me. A sudden gust of wind swept through the attic, extinguishing my flashlight. The room plunged into complete darkness, and the crying intensified. Panic gripped me as I fumbled to reignite the flashlight. In that moment, a faint whisper seemed to pierce the air, speaking words that sent chills down my spine. "Help me." I recoiled, unsure whether the plea was real or a figment of my overactive imagination. The attic was no longer just a space. It was a portal to a realm of unanswered questions and unresolved sorrows. Driven by a mix of fear and compassion, I pressed on. Following the sound of the crying, it led me to a hidden corner, obscured by dusty sheets. As I peeled them away, my flashlight revealed a small, forgotten alcove with a decaying rocking chair. And there, in the dim light, stood the apparition of a young girl. Her eyes were hollow, filled with a silent plea for release. I felt a surge of empathy and a strange connection, as if her sorrow echoed my own. Without words, she beckoned me to follow her gaze towards an old, dusty photograph. It depicted a family, a father, a mother, and the little girl, their smiles forever frozen in time. Recognition struck me like a lightning bolt. The family in the photograph was the previous owner of this haunted haven. The girl's spirit had lingered, trapped in the memories of her former life. With newfound purpose, I pledged to help her find peace. The attic, once a place of mystery and fear, now held a shared journey of healing. Armed with determination and a connection that transcended the boundaries of the living and the dead, we set out to unravel the untold story of the house. Little did I know that my decision to confront the unknown would lead me down a path of discovery, redemption, and a connection that defied the boundaries of the living and the afterlife. The cheap rent had come at a cost, but it was a price I was willing to pay for a chance at redemption and closure for the restless spirit that haunted my newfound home. With newfound determination, I embarked on a journey to unravel the dark secrets that bound the little girl's spirit to the desolate attic. As I delved into the house's history, a chilling revelation emerged. The family in the photograph had met a tragic end at the hands of none other than the sinister landlord, Michael. Haunted by the memories of my own struggles and heartbreaks, I felt a strange connection to the lost soul. The crying girl became a spectral companion, guiding me through the labyrinth of deception and malevolence that shrouded the old house. In the process, I discovered the twisted truth. Michael, the callous landlord, was responsible for the demise of the innocent family. The girl, along with her parents, had fallen victim to his malevolent deeds. The attic, a silent witness to their suffering, became purgatory of unfinished business and lingering grief. Armed with this knowledge, a plan began to form in my mind. I couldn't let the tormented spirits remain trapped, shackled to the painful memories of their untimely demise. It was time to confront Michael, the puppet master behind the spectral tragedy. Late one night, as the house groaned under the weight of its haunted history, I lured Michael into the attic. The crying girl's ethereal presence loomed in the shadows, and the air became charged with an otherworldly energy. Michael, oblivious to the impending reckoning, followed me hesitantly. As we entered the attic, the atmosphere thickened. The crying girl's sobs grew louder, resonating through the haunted space. Michael's face contorted in fear as the truth unraveled before him. The ghostly figure of the little girl materialized, her eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and anger. The room trembled with the intensity of the emotions that had festered for years. With sudden force, the girl reached out to Michael, pulling him into the spectral realm. The attic became a vortex of swirling shadows as the tormented spirits sought retribution. Michael's screams echoed through the void, and in an instant, he was dragged into the abyss, vanishing into a hellish dimension that awaited him. Silence enveloped the attic as the portal closed, leaving behind a purified space. The oppressive energy that had plagued the house for years lifted, and the atmosphere felt lighter. The crying girl's spirit, having found closure, faded away with a gentle whisper of gratitude. As I stood alone in the attic, the weight of the past seemed to dissipate. I glanced down to see a set of keys on the ground, the keys to the house that Michael once wielded. It was a symbolic transfer of ownership, and with it, a sense of responsibility and a newfound purpose. Over the years, I meticulously renovated the house, erasing the traces of its haunted past. The walls, once witnesses to tragedy, were now adorned with fresh paint and warm memories. The creaks and groans transformed into the comforting sounds of a home. As I walked through the now serene rooms, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness. The crying girl, my spectral companion, was gone. The house was now mine, free from the malevolent presence that had plagued it. Years passed, and life took on a semblance of normalcy. The house became my sanctuary, a place of solace and redemption. Yet, in quiet moments, I found myself wondering if I would ever encounter the crying girl again. Her memory lingered, a bittersweet reminder of the inexplicable bond forged between the living and the dead. As I stood in the tranquil living room, holding the keys that symbolized my triumph over the supernatural forces that once tormented the space, I couldn't shake the feeling that the story was not truly over. The echoes of the past lingered, leaving me to ponder the mysteries of the afterlife and the enduring connection between spirits and the living. And that was Every Night I Can Hear a Little Girl Crying in the Attic of My New Home, by Chronos 000. The title is longer, but I shortened it for, it's a long title. I like the story. I think it's quite interesting how it kind of really is a story of, like he keeps saying, redemption, and basically he helps the spirit be able to move on by getting rid of the evil landlord. Quite a funny little spin on a horror story, if you ask me. I kind of think that's kind of it. I sadly don't really know what else to say about it. I think the concept is fun. I thought it was quite an interesting little read, but I do feel like there could have been a little bit more substance there. That's just my personal opinion. I still thought the story was good. Don't get me wrong. I've enjoyed it, and I hope you have too. We'll see you for the next one. Take care. The Apple by H.G. Wells. I must get rid of it, said the man in the corner of the carriage, abruptly breaking the silence. Mr. Hinchcliffe looked up, hearing imperfectly. He had been lost in the rapt contemplation of the college cap tied by a string to his portmanteau handles, the outward and visible sign of his newly gained pedagogic position, in the rapt appreciation of the college cap and the pleasant anticipations it excited. For Mr. Hinchcliffe had just matriculated at London University, and was going to be junior assistant at the Homewood Grammar School, a very enviable position. He stared across the carriage at his fellow traveller. "Why not give it away?" said this person. "Give it away. Why not?" He was a tall, dark, sunburnt man with a pale face. His arms were folded tightly, and his feet were on the seat in front of him. He was pulling at a lank black mustache. He stared hard at his toes. "Why not?" he said. Mr. Hinchcliffe coughed. The stranger lifted his eyes. They were curious, dark grey eyes, and stared blankly at Mr. Hinchcliffe for the best part of a minute, perhaps. His expression grew to interest. "Yes," he said slowly. "Why not? And end it." "I don't quite follow you, I'm afraid," said Mr. Hinchcliffe, with another cough. "You don't quite follow me," said the stranger, quite mechanically, his singular eyes wandering from Mr. Hinchcliffe to the bag with its ostentatiously displayed cap, and back to Mr. Hinchcliffe's downy face. "You're so abrupt, you know," apologized Mr. Hinchcliffe. "Why shouldn't I?" said the stranger, following his thoughts. "You are a student," he said, addressing Mr. Hinchcliffe. "I am, by correspondence, of the London University," said Mr. Hinchcliffe, with irrepressible pride, and feeling nervously at his tie. "In pursuit of knowledge," said the stranger, and suddenly took his feet off the seat, put his fist on his knees, and stared at Mr. Hinchcliffe as though he had never seen a student before. "Yes," he said, and flung out an index finger. Then he rose, took a bag from the hat rack, and unlocked it. Quite silently he drew out something round and wrapped in a quantity of silver paper, and unfolded this carefully. He held it out towards Mr. Hinchcliffe, a small, very smooth, golden yellow fruit. Mr. Hinchcliffe's eyes and mouth were open. He did not offer to take this object, if he was intended to take it. "That," said this fantastic stranger, speaking very slowly, "is the apple of the tree of knowledge. Look at it, small and bright and wonderful. Knowledge, and I am going to give it to you." Mr. Hinchcliffe's mind worked painfully for a minute, and then the sufficient explanation, "Mad!" flashed across his brain, and illuminated the whole situation. One humoured madman. He put his head a little on one side. "The apple of the tree of knowledge, eh?" said Mr. Hinchcliffe, regarding it with a finely assumed air of interest, and then looking at the interlocutor. "But don't you want to eat it yourself? And, besides, how did you come by it?" "It never fades. I've had it now for 3 months, and it is ever bright and smooth and ripe and desirable as you see it." He laid his hand on his knee and regarded the fruit musingly. Then he began to wrap it again in the papers, as though he had abandoned his intention of giving it away. "But how did you come by it?" said Mr. Hinchcliffe, who had his argumentative side. "And how do you know that it is the fruit of the tree?" "I bought this fruit," said the stranger, 3 months ago, for a drink of water and a crust of bread. The man who gave it to me, because I kept the life in him, was an Armenian. Armenia! That wonderful country, the first of all countries where the Ark of the Flood remains to this day, buried in the glaciers of Mount Ararat. This man, I say, fleeing with others from Kurds who would come upon them, went up into desolate places among the mountains, places beyond the common knowledge of men. And fleeing from imminent pursuit, they came to a slope, high among the mountain peaks, green with the grass-like knife blades that cut and slashed most pitilessly to anyone who went into it. The Kurds were close behind, and there was nothing for it but to plunge in, and the worst of it was that the paths they made through it, at a price of their blood, served for the Kurds to follow. Every one of the fugitives was killed, save this Armenian and another. He heard the screams and cries of his friends, and the swish of the grass about those who were pursuing them. It was tall grass rising overhead. And then a shouting and answers, and when he paused, everything was still. He pushed out again, not understanding, cut and bleeding, until he came out on a steep slope of rocks below a precipice, and then he saw the grass was all on fire, and the smoke of it rose like a veil between him and his enemies. The stranger paused. "Yes?" said Mr. Hinchcliffe. "Yes?" There he was, all torn and bloody from the knife blades of the grass, the rocks blazing under the afternoon sun, the sky molten brass, and the smoke of the fire driving towards him. He dared not stay there. Death he did not mind, but torture? Far away beyond the smoke he heard shouts and cries, women screaming. So he went clambering up a gorge in the rocks. Everywhere were bushes with dry branches that stuck like thorns among the leaves, until he clambered over the brow of a ridge that hid him. And then he met his companion, a shepherd, who had also escaped. And counting cold and famine and thirst as nothing against the Kurds, they went on into the heights, and among the snow and ice. They wandered 3 whole days. The 3rd day came the vision. I suppose hungry men often do see visions, but then there is this fruit. He lifted the wrapped globe in his hand. And I have heard it too, from other mountaineers who have known something of the legend. It was in the evening time, when the stars were increasing, that they came down a slope of polished rock into a huge dark valley all set about with strange contorted trees, and in these hung little globes, like glowworm spheres, strange round yellow lights. Suddenly this valley was lit far away, many miles away, far down it with a golden flame marching slowly athwart it, that made the stunted trees against it black as night, and turned the slopes all about them and their figures to the likeness of fiery gold. And at the vision, they, knowing the legends of the mountains, instantly knew that it was Eden they saw, or the sentinel of Eden, and they fell upon their faces like men struck dead. When they dared to look again, the valley was dark for a space, and then the light came returning, a burning amber. At that the shepherd sprang to his feet, and with a shout began to run towards the light, but the other man was too fearful to follow him. He stood stunned, amazed and terrified, watching his companion recede towards the marching glare. And hardly had the shepherd set out when there came a noise like thunder, the beating of invisible wings hurrying up the valley, and a great and terrible fear. And at that the man who gave me the fruit turned, if he might still escape, and hurrying headlong up the slope again, with that tumult sweeping after him, he stumbled against one of these stunted bushes, and a ripe fruit came off it into his hand. This fruit. Forthwith the wings and thunder rolled all about him. He fell and fainted, and when he came to his senses he was back among the blackened ruins of his own village, and I and the others were attending to the wounded. A vision? But the golden fruit of the tree was still clutched in his hand. There were others there who knew the legend, knew what the strange fruit might be. He paused. "And this is it," he said. It was a most extraordinary story to be told in a third-class carriage on a Sussex railway. It was as if the real was a mere veil to the fantastic, and here was the fantastic poking through. "Is it?" was all Mr. Hinchcliffe could say. "The legend," said the stranger, "tells that those thickets of dwarfs trees growing about the garden sprang from the apple that Adam carried in his hand when he and Eve were driven forth. He felt something in his hand, saw the half-eaten apple, and flung it petulantly aside. And there they grow, in that desolate valley, girdled round with the everlasting snows, and there the fiery swords keep ward against the judgment day." "But I thought these things were—" Mr. Hinchcliffe paused. "Fables. Parables, rather. Do you mean to tell me that there in Armenia—" The stranger answered the unfinished question with the fruit in his open hand. "But you don't know," said Mr. Hinchcliffe. That is the fruit of the tree of knowledge. The man may have had a sort of mirage, say. Suppose—" "Look at it," said the stranger. It was certainly a strange-looking globe, not really an apple. Mr. Hinchcliffe saw, and a curious glowing golden colour, almost as though light itself was wrought into its substance. As he looked at it, he began to see more vividly the desolate valley among the mountains, the guarding swords of fire, the strange antiquities of the story he had just heard. He rubbed a knuckle into his eye. "But," said he, "it is kept like that, smooth and full, 3 months. Longer than that it is now by some days. No drying, withering, no decay." "And you yourself," said Mr. Hinchcliffe, "really believe that is the forbidden fruit?" There was no mistaking the earnestness of a man's manner and his perfect sanity. "The fruit of knowledge," he said. "Suppose it was," said Mr. Hinchcliffe, after a pause, still staring at it. "But after all," said Mr. Hinchcliffe, "it's not my kind of knowledge, not the sort of knowledge. I mean, Adam and Eve have eaten it already." "We inherit their sins, not their knowledge," said the stranger. "That would make it clear and bright again. We should see into everything, through everything, into the deepest meaning of everything." "Why don't you eat it then?" said Mr. Hinchcliffe with an inspiration. "I took it intending to eat it," said the stranger. "Man has fallen. Merely to eat again could scarcely—" "Knowledge is power," said Mr. Hinchcliffe. "But is it happiness? I am older than you, more than twice as old. Time after time I have held this in my hand, and my heart has failed me at the thought of all that one might know. That terrible lucidity. Suppose suddenly all the world became pitilessly clear." "That, I think, would be a great advantage," said Mr. Hinchcliffe. "On the whole. Suppose you saw into the hearts and minds of everyone about you, into their most secret recesses, people you loved, whose love you valued. You'd soon find out the humbugs," said Mr. Hinchcliffe, greatly struck by the idea. "And worse, to know yourself, bare of your most intimate illusions, to see yourself in your place, all that your lusts and weaknesses prevented your doing, no merciful perspective. That might be an excellent thing too. Know thyself, you know." "You are young," said the stranger. "If you don't care to eat it, and it bothers you, why don't you throw it away?" "There again, perhaps, you will not understand me. To me, how could one throw away a thing like that, glowing wonderful? Once one has it, one is bound. But, on the other hand, to give it away! To give it away to someone who thirsted after knowledge, who found no terror in the thought of that clear perception. Of course," said Mr. Hinchcliffe thoughtfully, "it might be sort of poisonous fruit." And then his eye caught something motionless. The end of a whiteboard black-lettered outside the carriage window. "Wood," he saw. He started convulsively. "Gracious," said Mr. Hinchcliffe, "Homewood!" And the practical present blotted out the mystic realizations that had been stealing upon him. In another moment he was opening the carriage door, portmanteau in hand. The guard was already fluttering his green flag. Mr. Hinchcliffe jumped out. "Here!" said a voice behind him, and he saw the dark eyes of the stranger shining and the golden fruit, bright and bare, held out of the open carriage door. He took it instinctively. The train was already moving. "No!" shouted the stranger, and made a snatch at it as if to take it back. "Stand away!" cried a country porter, thrusting forward to close the door. The stranger shouted something Mr. Hinchcliffe did not catch, head and arm thrust excitedly out of the window, and then the shadow of the bridge fell on him, and in a trice he was hidden. Mr. Hinchcliffe stood astonished, staring at the end of the last wagon receding around the bend, and with the wonderful fruit in his hand. For the fraction of a minute his mind was confused, and then he became aware that 2 or 3 people on the platform were regarding him with interest. Was he not the new grammar school master making his debut? It occurred to him that, so far as they could tell, the fruit might very well be the naive refreshment of an orange. He flushed at the thought, and thrust the fruit into his side pocket, where it bulged undesirably. But there was no help for it, so he went towards them, awkwardly concealing his sense of awkwardness, to ask the way to the grammar school, and the means of getting his portmanteau and the 2 tin boxes which lay upon the platform hither. Of all the odd and fantastic yarns to tell a fellow! His luggage could be taken on a truck for 6pence, he found, and he could proceed it on foot. He fancied an ironical note in the voices. He was painfully aware of his contour. The curious earnestness of the man in the train, and the glamour of the story he told, had for a time diverted the current of Mr. Hinchcliffe's thoughts. It drove like a mist before his immediate concerns, fires that went to and fro. But the preoccupation of his new position, and the impression he was to produce upon Homewood generally, and the school people in particular, returned upon him with reinvigorating power before he left the station and cleared his mental atmosphere. But it is extraordinary what an inconvenient thing the addition of a soft and rather brightly golden fruit, not 3 inches in diameter, may prove to a sensitive youth on his best appearance. In the pocket of his black jacket it bulged dreadfully, spoilt the lines altogether. He passed the little old lady in black, and he felt her eye drop upon the excrescence at once. He was wearing one glove and carrying the other, together with his stick, so that to bear the fruit openly was impossible. In one place, where the road into the town seemed suitably secluded, he took his encumbrance out of his pocket and tried it in his hat. It was just too large. The hat wobbled ludicrously, and just as he was taking it out again, a butcher's boy came driving round the corner. "Confound it," said Mr. Hinchcliffe. He would have eaten the thing, and attained omniscience there and then, but it would seem so silly to go into town sucking a juicy fruit, and it certainly felt juicy. If one of the boys should come by, it might do him a serious injury with his discipline so to be seen, and the juice might make his face sticky and get upon his cuffs, or it might be an acid juice as potent as lemon, and take all the colour out of his clothes. Then round a bend in the lane came 2 pleasant sunlit girlish figures. They were walking slowly towards the town and chattering. At any moment they might look round and see a hot-faced young man behind them carrying a kind of phosphorescent yellow tomato. They would be sure to laugh. "Hang!" said Mr. Hinchcliffe, and with a swift jerk sent the encumbrance flying over the stone wall of an orchard that there abutted on the road. As it vanished, he felt a faint twinge of loss that lasted scarcely a moment. He adjusted the stick and glove in his hand and walked on, erect and self-conscious, to pass the girls. But in the darkness of the night, Mr. Hinchcliffe had a dream, and saw the valley, and the flaming swords, and the contorted trees, and knew that it really was the apple of the tree of knowledge that he had thrown regardless away, and he awoke very unhappy. In the morning his regret had passed, but afterwards it returned and troubled him. Never, however, when he was happy or busily occupied. At last, one moonlight night about 11, when all Homewood was quiet, his regrets returned with redoubled force, and there with an impulse to adventure. He slipped out of the house and over the playground wall, went through the silent town to Station Lane, and climbed into the orchard where he had thrown the fruit. But nothing was to be found of it there among the dewy grass and the faint intangible glows of dandelion down.